Suddenly, I woke up from the dream, noticing the light streaming through the bottom of the curtains, realizing it was morning. As I woke, my body felt heavy, and something seemed to be holding me down. What is this? Daniel, help me. Fully opening my eyes, I was struck with horror. My hands and feet were bound to the bed with plastic ties. Unable to understand what had happened, I started to panic. Just then, the door opened, and my husband, Daniel, appeared, smirking mischievously. What is going on? You could fall, right? He said casually, as if playing a prank. If you move suddenly, you might fall off the bed. It'd be terrible if something happened to the baby. So I tied you down. You must be joking. I can't move like this. I pleaded, worried for the baby inside me, asking him repeatedly to untie the ropes. But he ignored me, closing the door behind him. I heard the front door close, and a chill ran down my spine. Wait a minute. Didn't he say he was going out for golf this morning? The air conditioning in the room was set to a timer, and it was no longer running. With the windows sealed shut, the room would eventually become stiflingly hot. Daniel, wait, help me, come back, please. At first, I kept calling out for help, but as the summer heat filled the room, my strength began to fade. My voice grew hoarse, and I could no longer call for help. The fear of something happening to my baby squeezed at my heart. Tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. What is happening to me? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours passed. In the end, Daniel didn't return until nightfall. When Daniel opened the front door, a faint odor would fill the house. Following the smell, he would reach my bedroom. Surely, he'd sensed something was wrong, and he'd open the door. In the darkness of the unlit room, he'd find my bed, reeking with a foul stench. I could already imagine Daniel's face, twisted in fear. My name is Sandra, 40 years old. The November chill gradually seeped into my tired, emaciated body. The trees in the park had shed their leaves, signaling the quiet arrival of winter. Whenever I gazed at such scenes, I found myself lost in memories of the past. The office where I worked was located in a high-rise building in the heart of the city. I handled marketing tasks, including brand strategy and promotional activities. After surviving the morning rush hour commute and arriving at work, I looked around my desk, watching people busily moving about, just as I did. Like them, I kept a smile on my face as I threw myself into my tasks. My desk was piled high with project materials. The phone rang incessantly. Meetings with colleagues involved exchanging ideas, and at times, I had to make difficult decisions. Immersing myself in this routine was how I found meaning in my existence. When I was in elementary school, my world was turned upside down when my parents divorced. My mother worked tirelessly, day and night, to support me all the way through college. Watching her, I resolved to become strong. Now that I'm an adult, I often take my mother on trips, trying to repay her for all she's done, sharing many outings together. But despite all of this, there's a deep, inexplicable anguish I carry within me. I have a boyfriend named Daniel, who is 3 years younger than I am. When I thought about marrying him, I believed a happy future awaited us. But somewhere inside, anxiety swirled. We met when Daniel joined my department as a new team member. Serious and passionate, Daniel made a lasting impression on me the first time we met. As his supervisor, I became someone he admired like an older sister. We often went out for meals together, and sometimes shared drinks. After leaving the bar, we'd even stroll through the park, sometimes until just before the last train. In the dead of night, the park was dimly lit, with only the faint glow of street lights illuminating patches of autumn leaves. "Sandra, isn't it beautiful?" "It really is. The beauty of nature is so soothing," I replied, smiling. Suddenly, Daniel stopped in his tracks and gazed intently into my eyes. There was a softness in his expression, a tender light I hadn't seen in him before. My heart began to race. When we're together like this, I feel something special. I feel the same way. When I'm with you, I feel calm, safe. The words came out naturally, surprising even myself. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the breathtaking beauty of the illuminated autumn leaves under the white street lights, but I found myself being completely honest with my feelings. In the darkness, I couldn't quite make out Daniel's expression, but he continued with a slight tension in his voice. "Does it mean maybe you feel?" As he gently took my hand, I felt warmth radiate from his touch, and suddenly my body felt just a little lighter. The soft brush of his fingertips against my palm sent my heart racing. A wave of special emotion washed over me. "Sandra, I have special feelings for you. I want to stay with you forever." Daniel's words, spoken with such sincerity, filled me instantly. They resonated deep within my heart, and for a moment, it felt like everything around us lost its color, leaving just the two of us enveloped in a quiet, intimate atmosphere. As Daniel slowly leaned in closer, I found myself surrendering to the moment without a second thought. His warmth enveloped me, making me feel as if we were the only two people in the world. My heart was entirely captivated by him. From that day on, the world I saw changed completely. The beauty of autumn sunsets seemed more vibrant. I finally understood what it meant to fall in love. Daniel was kind to my mother, and our relationship progressed smoothly. When he proposed, I was overjoyed, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the lingering thought, am I really the right one for him? I was always haunted by the worry that, because of my age, I might have trouble conceiving, but I could never bring myself to voice that fear. I feared that if I said it out loud, the beautiful reality that felt like a dream, Daniel's love for me, might shatter and disappear like an illusion. I imagined that he might start to worry about our future, and if he did, what words could I offer to reassure him, to hold on to his hand, and keep him by my side? The first time I met Daniel's parents, when we went to announce our engagement, I was nervous. His father, Mike, had a stern and silent demeanor, while his mother, Elizabeth, was kind and welcoming. At one point, when I was alone with Elizabeth, she quietly said, "Thank you for marrying Daniel," and smiled at me warmly. "No, it's me who should be thanking you. I'm 3 years older than Daniel, and I feel like I'm not worthy of him." Elizabeth said nothing more, only smiling as she lightly patted my back. Later, Daniel's parents showed me his childhood photo albums. One picture stood out: Daniel posing in a polo shirt and chinos, probably celebrating his 13th birthday. The polo shirt bore a famous brand's logo, and even in the old photo, the quality of the clothes was apparent. He's always been particular about fashion. "That shirt is from a luxury brand, and doesn't he look great? If I have a son, I'd want him to wear this." I gazed at the photo, smiling weakly. I remembered that I also had a picture from my own 13th birthday. It was before my parents divorced, and I distinctly recalled crying because I didn't like the red dress my mother had picked out for me. A bright red dress. It was a simple design. I remembered how one of my friends had a dress for her 13th birthday that was adorned with gold embroidery and was in vibrant shades of blue and pink. My dress had a cute floral pattern, but the collar had hand-stitched embroidery that my mother had sewn herself. and I hated it so much that I cried. When I told this story, Elizabeth smiled elegantly and said, "Maybe the collar had torn, and she had to mend it. What a lovely mother you have." As I listened, I realized that Daniel's family was likely a bit wealthier than mine. Talking about my childhood experiences began to make me feel a little embarrassed. Even so, his parents were always kind and considerate towards me, making me feel welcome. I remember how much warmth their blessing brought to my heart. It was almost overwhelming. We had promised each other to build the perfect family, but deep down, I wasn't able to fully believe those words myself. I constantly felt like I was all alone. I think it's because I couldn't bring myself to truly love who I was. After we got married, the days of happiness continued. I kept hoping that this happiness would last forever. We both worked, sharing the household chores, and supporting each other in our daily lives. I wanted a child, but for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. I can't explain why, but I often found myself feeling a bit down about it. One afternoon, my heart was pounding with excitement, as if I had discovered the key to a long-forgotten treasure. With a pregnancy test in my hand, I stood on the cusp of both hope and fear. No matter what the result, I knew my emotions would overwhelm me. Filled with a sense of expectation I could barely contain, I was also afraid. The conflict inside me swirled like a storm, threatening to consume my heart. When I saw the positive result, I couldn't hold back the tears that spilled from my eyes. They were tears of joy. There's a life growing inside me. I gently caressed my stomach with my hand. I felt the immense joy of becoming a mother, and the weight of the responsibility that came with it. The struggles and hardships of my past now felt like old chains that were slowly being lifted. Given my age, I hadn't thought it would be easy, so the congratulations from everyone around me were overwhelming. Both my parents and my friends rejoiced in my pregnancy, and the days were filled with excitement and anticipation. But that joy didn't last long. As morning sickness set in, I found it increasingly difficult to carry on with my daily life. I became overly sensitive to smells, and even working became almost impossible. After consulting with my doctor, I was given a medical certificate and decided to take maternity leave early. I thought I could finally relax. However, my heart gradually began to grow darker. Once I started maternity leave, Daniel's attitude changed drastically. Perhaps seeing me suffer through the morning sickness made me appear lazy in his eyes. "You're home all day. Are you just slacking off?" At first, his remarks seemed minor, but soon the hurtful words turned into outright verbal abuse, and it became a daily occurrence. "Daniel, I'm really struggling right now. This could affect the baby, too. Please, try to understand." I desperately wanted him to understand my situation, but my words never seemed to reach him. It seemed that Elizabeth had managed to live her life as usual throughout her pregnancy. For Daniel, that image of his mother was probably the ideal of what a mother should be. No matter how hard I tried to explain that every pregnancy is different and that I was truly struggling, Daniel would always twist his face into an expression of disgust. It hurt, and I felt lonely. Eventually, I decided to talk to my mom about the situation. Over the phone, my mother spoke with a sorrowful tone. "Men take time to develop a sense of responsibility as fathers." It was as if she was advising me to accept it. Hearing the sadness in her voice, I decided I wouldn't bring it up to her anymore. I didn't want to cause her any more worry. But after that, my mom started visiting me frequently, helping out with the household chores. I kept that fact from Daniel, knowing he would probably find it annoying if he knew she was coming over. As the serene evenings before bed passed, my love for the child growing inside me only deepened. Yet, Daniel's attitude worsened in stark contrast. Once I entered the stable period of pregnancy, my belly grew, and the baby's movements caused pain in my back and knees. The swelling in my feet was especially severe, to the point where I couldn't even wear my usual shoes anymore. It was terrifying. Still, Daniel would insult me, calling me lazy and unkempt. I couldn't bear it anymore. I considered divorce many times, but my thoughts would always return to the child in my womb. And I hesitated. The baby was growing well, and before I knew it, I had reached the final month of my pregnancy. I gave my mother a spare key to the house in case I went into labor while Daniel was at work. If anything happens, I'll rush over right away. Don't worry. When she said that, I realized I would always be her child. It felt strange, yet somehow amusing, that I, a child in her eyes, was about to give birth to my own child. Knowing my mother would be there for me, it gave me peace of mind. One day, I woke up feeling unusually fatigued. As I stood in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, I felt a wave of nausea and pressed my fingers to my forehead. Daniel, who had just woken up, glanced at me and sighed with irritation. What a way to start the morning. Stop acting like you're so sick all the time. I really am feeling unwell. You're at home all day, right? Just making breakfast and dinner. How could that be so exhausting? You can't possibly feel sick. I'm playing golf tomorrow, so make sure everything's ready. I can't do it. I feel really sick. I need to rest now. The nausea was overwhelming, and I desperately wanted to lie down immediately. My body felt feverish, and the shirt I was wearing was slightly damp with sweat. But Daniel, without a hint of concern for how I was feeling, glared at me with a furious expression. You're always at home, and you treat me, your husband, like nothing. Forget it. I'll do it myself. His angry shout made my chest tighten with pain, and I felt a deep sense of loneliness spread through me. Still furious, Daniel stormed out, yelling that he would buy his own breakfast at a convenience store. Tears began to fall as I thought about the baby in my belly, and the way Daniel had changed. We had loved each other so much. How had things ended up like this? I kept asking myself that question over and over. My condition worsened, and I went to the bedroom to lie down on the bed. Even as I curled up under the blankets, Daniel's angry voice still echoed in my ears. Maybe, with the baby on the way, Daniel had been suppressing a lot of his own frustrations. I have to try harder. Looking up at the ceiling, I placed my hand on my forehead and immediately realized I had a fever. As my consciousness became hazy, I began to worry about the future, filled with a sense of dark uncertainty as I quietly closed my eyes. Even though I slept through the day, my condition didn't improve. By nightfall, Daniel handed me some cold medicine as I lay there, clearly unwell. When I said, "I can't take this because I'm pregnant," he retorted, "Don't you think it's more of a problem that your fever won't go down?" We couldn't agree, and in the end, I didn't take the medicine. What if the baby in your belly gets hurt because of your fever? Will you take responsibility for that? I don't know, but maybe resting will make it better. I called Mom earlier. My mom never got sick when she was pregnant because she took care of herself. Can you just pull yourself together already? I'm sorry. I made sure to drink plenty of fluids and placed a cooling gel sheet on my forehead. Perhaps because of the fever, I fell into a deep sleep. I think I was dreaming. In the dream, I was a young girl, walking somewhere while holding my mother's hand. Several times, I scratched my neck and said, "It's itchy." I kept complaining to my mom about the itch. Why was my neck so itchy back then? My mother knelt down, hugged me, and smiled gently. Suddenly, I woke up from the dream. noticing the light streaming through the bottom of the curtains, realizing it was morning. The moment I woke, my body felt heavy, and something seemed off. Fully opening my eyes, I was struck with horror. My hands and feet were tied to the bed with plastic straps. The straps weren't tight, so they didn't hurt, but I was completely restrained, unable to free myself. My heart began to pound, and fear rushed through my entire body. What is this? Daniel, help me. I couldn't understand what was happening, and I started to panic. Then the door creaked open, and Daniel appeared, wearing a sinister smile. His grin was eerie, sending a cold shiver deep into my core. What is going on? I desperately demanded an explanation, but Daniel just snorted and said, "You could fall, couldn't you?" "What do you mean?" I asked in confusion, and Daniel, as if he were playing a prank, continued, "If you suddenly moved, you might fall off the bed, right? It'd be terrible if something happened to the baby. That's why I tied you up like this." "You've got to be kidding. I can't move in this state." Worried about the baby, I repeatedly begged him to untie me, but he ignored me and closed the bedroom door behind him. Soon, I heard the sound of the front door closing, and a chill ran through me. Wait a minute. Didn't he say he was going to play golf this morning? The AC in the room was set on a timer, so it had already turned off. While the curtains blocked direct sunlight, the windows were shut tight, and soon the room would start to heat up. "Wait, Daniel, help, come back, please." At first, I kept calling for help, but as the summer heat filled the room, my strength gradually faded. My voice grew hoarse, and I lost the energy to keep crying for help. The fear that something might happen to the baby gripped my heart. Tears flowed uncontrollably down my cheeks. What is this? An hour passed, then 2, then 3. Some part of me had believed that Daniel would return in a few minutes, smirking with that cruel expression on his face. But being tied up in the heat for hours in the middle of summer could be life-threatening. "Help, please help. Someone." I was so weak that I could barely raise my voice anymore. Just then, I heard the doorbell ring. Mom had come over to help with the housework. With my last ounce of strength, "Help," I shouted. The bedroom fell into silence again. "Help, Mom." I heard the front door unlock. Mom rushed up the stairs and burst into the room, freezing in shock at the sight of me. "Sandra, what happened?" She immediately tried to untie the ropes, but couldn't figure out the knots in the plastic straps, so she ran to another room to grab scissors and cut me free. Once I was released, I could finally breathe again. Looking at me with a worried expression, Mom asked what had happened. I told her everything about Daniel's cold behavior, why he had tied me up, and my fears about the baby. Mom's face grew serious as she listened. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore, and I began sobbing uncontrollably. "I can't take this anymore. I can't bear living like this." Mom took a bottle of water out of her bag, handed it to me, and gently rubbed my back. "It's enough. You don't have to endure this anymore, Sandra. But won't the baby feel lonely without a dad? Why don't you just get a divorce and come back home? Your happiness is what matters most." Mom's words, from the person who cares about me more than anyone else in this world, sparked something inside me. All the hesitation I had vanished, and now I was fully resolved to get a divorce. If you hadn't come, I could have been trapped in this heat all day. It could have ended in a disaster. Yes, even if it's a joke, it's way too cruel. I picked up the teddy bear that was sitting in the corner of the bedroom and vowed revenge. I will never forgive him. He didn't just endanger me, he put our child at risk too. As my quiet anger bubbled up, Mom began packing up belongings, preparing for us to leave the house. Determined, I headed to the fridge, grabbing all sorts of food, piling up heaps of garbage, and stuffing it all into the bed. Eggshells, rotting vegetables, and leftover scraps accumulated in my hands as I tossed them in without a second thought. The stench hit my nose, and I couldn't help but feel a strange amusement at the absurdity of my actions. Mom noticed what I was doing and, startled, spoke up. "Sandra, what are you doing?" Her confused expression was understandable. Even I was aware that my behavior was bizarre. I brought the teddy bear over to her and reached into its back. From inside, I pulled out a small, black, square device and, with a serious face, began explaining. "Actually, when I first started thinking about divorce, I began recording Daniel's abusive words. I planted a bug in the room to prove what kind of person he really is." Words spilled from my mouth, almost without my control. It was as if I wasn't myself. Maybe my anger had gone beyond the breaking point, and now I was acting purely on impulse, no longer rational. Mom's eyes widened, filled with both shock and understanding. "A bug? Why do you have something like that?" A friend of mine investigated her husband's cheating on her own. In the end, she found out and got divorced, so she didn't need it anymore and gave it to me. It's been lying around. But once Daniel started acting strangely, I decided to use it, and that's why you're stuffing garbage into the bed. I bet Daniel will be shocked by the stench, and I want to see how he reacts." After thinking it over for a moment, Mom agreed to help. We covered the bed with a blanket, making it look as though I were still tied up inside. When Daniel came home, he would surely notice the foul odor and head straight for the bedroom. That's when he'd see the bizarre scene we'd set up. "But Sandra, are you sure about this? What if he loses his temper? I don't expect anything from him anymore. I've given up hope that he'll ever understand how I feel." Unlike my worried mother, I remained completely calm. Later that night, likely drunk after drinking with his golf buddies, Daniel returned home, shouting loudly, "Are you okay?" Mom and I were parked near a neighborhood park, sitting in the car, listening through headphones to the sound coming from the bug. We had been watching the house from a distance, and when we saw the living room lights turn on, we quickly switched on the device. The hidden bug inside the teddy bear transmitted the sound, allowing us to hear everything in real time. Sitting in the dimly lit car, eavesdropping through the device, we knew how suspicious we must look to any passerby. But there was no turning back now. With my heart pounding, I listened closely to the sound coming from the bug. "What the hell is this?" Daniel's panicked voice echoed through the room, his shock and confusion palpable. The garbage I had left to rot in the bed must have filled the room with a horrendous stench, especially in the heat of summer. Daniel, likely holding his nose, began searching for the source of the smell, hesitantly opening the bedroom door. In the next instant, his scream rang out. "Eck, what the hell is this?" His voice was full of despair, as though he had been confronted with a scene too outrageous to comprehend. Imagining his reaction, I couldn't help but smirk inwardly. "Sandra, what did you do? Hey, at least say something. Are you still sleeping?" "Hey." Daniel's voice grew louder, but from the sound of it through the headphones, he was still frozen at the door, unable to approach the bed. His confusion filled me with satisfaction. But suddenly, I heard the sound of a police siren approaching. The police were here. A loud knock echoed from the front door, and for a moment, I froze in place. It seemed a neighbor had reported the awful smell and Daniel's shouting to the police. But the police? This soon? Daniel had only just come home. I glanced to my side and saw my mother looking at me with a sorrowful expression. On her phone was the call log, indicating she had made an emergency call. That's enough, Sandra. There are other ways to get revenge. Seeing the sadness in my mother's eyes made me realize just how foolish I had been. I let my anger drive me to this point of revenge, and she had stood by me without judgment, supporting me through it all. Daniel's frantic, panic shouting continued through the headphones, filling my ears. What the hell is going on? The microphone we'd placed near the front door picked up the conversation between Daniel and the police officers. Daniel was scrambling to explain himself, but his words kept faltering. We received a report that you tied up your wife and locked her in. Is that true? And what's with this smell? Daniel was at a loss for words, unable to respond, his confusion growing more obvious. No, that's not. You need to explain the situation, one of the officers prompted calmly, but Daniel only became more flustered. I didn't mean to. It's all a misunderstanding. His voice was tinged with desperation. A sense of superiority began to spread within me. I took off my headphones and sank deeply into the car seat back. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath. It felt as though a variety of emotions were slowly leaving my body, lightening the weight I'd been carrying. A few minutes later, we received a call from the police, and my mother and I headed toward the police station. On the way, we stopped at a convenience store to buy a can of coffee. We both looked up at the sky, absent-mindedly watching the slightly waning moon. I wonder what they'll ask us at the police station. Well, I guess it'll be something like, "What's with the garbage in the bed?" I sprayed my half-drunk coffee out in laughter. My mother joined in, and we both laughed for a while in the empty parking lot of the convenience store. I felt like it didn't really matter anymore. At the police station, I'd have to talk about things I didn't want to say to officers I'd never met before. I felt reluctant and wanted to escape, but maybe it was because I'd been running away all this time that I had endured Daniel's verbal abuse. If only I had been strong enough to say stop during one of our earlier arguments. If I had been that strong, perhaps my situation would have been very different now. After all this is over, let's go to a family restaurant and eat. How about an omelet, like we used to? My mother smiled gently, and I nodded lightly, then got back in the car. When we arrived at the police station, we explained our names and the situation to the officer at the reception. In the small room where we were led, Daniel was sitting in a simple chair, his face pale and lowered. If it were the old me, I would have worried for him, feeling sorry for his misery. But now he was the object of my hatred, and sympathy didn't even cross my mind. An officer greeted us and explained the situation. "Please come this way. We'll take your statement." We entered the interrogation room. Surrounded by the cold, stark walls, the room had a chilling atmosphere that seemed to freeze my feelings. The officer opened his notebook, wearing a gentle expression. "Please tell us what happened here." The kind atmosphere pushed me forward, and my words spilled out. Daniel tied me up with a rope and locked me in. His abusive words and treatment became unbearable. I told them I had planted a bug and had evidence of his verbal abuse. The officer's eyes changed, and I could see the surprise and seriousness with which they were processing my words. Daniel hurriedly opened his mouth. "This is a misunderstanding. She didn't do the housework, and she mocked me. That's why this happened." He began spouting his selfish excuses. "That's no reason to tie someone up with a rope." Daniel's expression froze for a moment. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he looked at me as though pleading for help. "Sandra, help me. If this keeps going, His voice sounded weak, almost like a small child's, but I felt no emotion in response to his words. "Daniel, I'm not going to help you anymore. I can't forgive you for what you've done. After everything he did to me, there was no way I could forgive him. If my mother hadn't come to the house that day, maybe. Thinking about it, the dark part inside of Daniel, the man in front of me with tearful eyes, became terrifying. Isn't planting a bug a crime? Even if it's to record my verbal abuse, it's an invasion of privacy, right? This is a serious crime, Daniel shouted, and the officer stared at him sharply. Yes, planting a bug is an invasion of privacy. However, there's something you must not forget. You have tied someone up, spoken abusive words, and committed acts of violence. A bug, I've been bugged. It seems that way. And the recordings revealed that you've been verbally abusing your wife, committing acts of violence, and even attempting murder. The officer's words hit Daniel like an arrow piercing his heart. Daniel lost his words and couldn't say anything more. Soon after, he began to cry. He cried bitterly, as if trying to release all his raw emotions. Leaving him there, I exited the interrogation room. I could feel the emotions that had been bottled up inside me slowly being released. Afterward, I decided to file a formal report. As the police procedures progressed, my testimony about Daniel's actions weighed heavily on me. In the end, Daniel was convicted of attempted murder. However, since it was his first offense, he was granted a suspended sentence. When I heard the result, my heart sank for a moment, but at the same time, I felt a new sense of hope. His actions weren't being forgiven, but I had taken the first step in reclaiming myself. I renewed my resolve to live for myself from now on. When I saw my mother smiling beside me, I slowly began to face forward. 6 months after the incident with Daniel, I was spending time with my healthy baby in my arms. The soft sunlight streamed into my parents' living room. Wrapped in a warm, cozy blanket, the baby slept innocently. Every time the little fingers moved, gentle emotions welled up inside me. A few months after the police matter, I had successfully given birth to a healthy baby. Now I was starting a new life with the strong support of my mother. She helped me with child care, making delicious meals every day. The baby's cries and my mother's laughter often echoed around us, filling the house with a bright, joyful atmosphere. After that incident, I quickly hired a lawyer and was able to divorce Daniel. When his parents came to apologize in person, they bowed deeply, which brought me a small sense of relief. They agreed to pay alimony and child support, and my life gradually started to stabilize. I thought that finally I could focus on raising my child. But peace didn't last long. One day, the doorbell rang. I had a bad feeling, so I gently cradled my baby again. I decided to ignore it and acted as though nothing was happening. But then I heard Daniel's voice from the yard. "Sandra, open the door," he was shouting. I tried to suppress my anxiety and, without opening the window, "Enough already," I shouted back. Then, the sound of him knocking on the window echoed. A wave of fear surged within me, and once again, the terror of facing him overwhelmed me. I didn't want to worry the baby, but I couldn't ignore him. Then Daniel appeared outside the window, his face wet with tears as he said, "I was wrong. Sandra, I need you and the baby." The sight of Daniel was completely different from the coldness he had shown before. He now looked like a small child. He continued, "I grew up with a strict dad, and Mom was always obedient to him. I've always admired that kind of family, but I know it must have been hard for you, Sandra. Go home. There's nothing more to talk about. Sandra, you're always so strong, and I've always felt inferior to you. When you went on maternity leave, I thought I had finally won. The person who works is the one who's important, right? The person who works is the one who's important. I pressed the baby's face gently to my chest, trying to avoid being seen as I stepped closer to him. Through the window, he was looking up at me, tears still streaming down his face. "I'll work harder, and I learn more than you, Sandra. Then you'll be happy, right? You thought I was unreliable. I'm sorry, I'll do better. I'll be someone you can rely on." "What are you saying? Just shut up and live with me. I've got my reputation to consider, too. Get out of the house now, and I've got the car waiting outside. Get ready." Seeing Daniel change so suddenly, even as he cried, something inside me shifted. Why? Why did I ever love a man like this? What made him change so much? But maybe it didn't matter anymore. I silently closed the curtains. Then I immediately decided to call the police. While making the call, I firmed up my resolve in my heart. I would never let him control me again. Every time the baby moved gently in my arms, its warmth gave me strength. I was determined to rise up again and take hold of a new future. Daniel was arrested due to the recent incident, since he was still on probation and had a restraining order against approaching me. He was forbidden from even coming near me. By breaking that order and showing up at my house, Daniel was immediately taken into custody by the police. After receiving contact from the police, Daniel's parents came to apologize in person. To be honest, I was surprised by their sincerity, but I was slowly firming up my decision to move forward. 3 years passed. While raising my child, I was busy and often forgot about many things. There were difficult times, but there were also many happy moments. There were times when I felt the pain of my child growing up without a father. But my child was growing strong and healthy. With my mother's help, the baby attended daycare. And although I still lived with my parents, it felt like we were living together as a team. In the soft sunlight coming through the window, the laughter of my child echoed, and warmth spread throughout my heart. I first heard about Daniel from a colleague. He had been fired from his company, and after I went on maternity leave, rumors spread about him mistreating his juniors. When I heard that, I felt a bit relieved. I truly felt glad that I had broken up with Daniel back then. With his presence fading further away, I was able to reclaim my own life. However, one day, while returning from daycare, an unexpected event occurred. A stranger approached me on the street. She introduced herself as one of Daniel's friends and told me that Daniel had recently been released from prison. She said she wanted to talk to me for a bit, and I felt uneasy. "What do you want?" I replied cautiously, and she began to tell me that Daniel had truly changed. She claimed that he had been reflecting deeply on his actions and now wanted to get back together with me. She earnestly told me this, bowing her head in desperation. I was stunned by her words. Daniel had changed. He regretted his past actions and wanted to come back to me. As I remained silent, unable to understand the desperation in her actions, she eventually looked up. "Oh, I see." Looking into the eyes of this woman, who claimed to be Daniel's friend, I understood. She had feelings for Daniel. While trying to convince me, her words held no real expectation. She was merely intoxicated with her own actions on his behalf. The woman explained that Daniel had truly changed. Now he regretted his past and had been thinking about me and the child. I stood there in silence, my chest aching. "I have no intention of having anything to do with Daniel anymore," I replied firmly, with unwavering resolve. I couldn't let myself be dragged around by Daniel anymore, not if I was to protect my own happiness. When I saw the sorrowful expression on her face, yet with eyes that seemed to hold a sense of relief, I felt an indescribable mix of emotions spreading in my chest. Still, I had something to protect. That is my daughter. Just as my mother protected me, I swore to protect my own daughter. No matter how much someone in this world may suffer from poverty or difficulties, I won't say that it doesn't concern me. But at this moment, I wanted to be someone who could protect only the important people within my reach. Afterwards, I went to pick up my child from daycare. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange, my daughter, Emma, ran happily toward me. "Mom." At the sound of her voice, my expression softened instantly. Seeing her smile, I reaffirmed that my decision was the right one. "Did you have fun today?" I asked, and my daughter smiled brightly and replied, "Yeah, I had fun." I felt happy. Why did my eyes well up with tears at that thought? Daniel's past was no longer part of my life. What mattered now was walking forward with my child, looking ahead to the future. On the way home, I noticed a small embroidery on the collar of my daughter's shirt. A three-leaf clover was delicately stitched on the neckline of her white printed shirt. It was an outfit my mother had bought for her recently. I remembered how, when I was little, I also had shirts with small embroidery around the collar. I used to hate how the collar would itch, but I never imagined my mother would do the same for her granddaughter. "Hey, isn't your collar itchy?" My daughter turned around and said, "No, it's not itchy." She didn't seem to mind at all. I smiled quietly, thinking, she's not like me at all. When we got home, I'd ask my mom about the meaning behind the embroidery, and I'd ask her to teach me how to do it too. I wouldn't let myself be trapped by the shadows of the past. I would create my happiness with my own hands. I would cherish the path I walk with my daughter. I was reminded once again that the one thing that brightly lights up my future is none other than the smile of my child.
I'm going to be a grandma soon. I'm eagerly looking forward to being there for my daughter Alana's first childbirth, but it's a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Next week, I had plans to take a short trip. There's still 2 weeks until the due date. But I was debating whether I should go, just in case something happens. Contrary to my anxiety, my husband Lawrence readily agreed. The day after I arrived back home by plane, I saw a photo on Alana's social media. In the picture, Alana was holding her newborn baby. Next to her stood Lawrence, forming a happy 3-generation family photo. What's this? The due date was supposed to be 2 weeks from now. Did it come early? And neither Lawrence nor Alana had contacted me. Was the due date I was told a lie? Once again, I was left out. As if to add insult to injury, my smartphone rang. It was Lawrence. "Hey! What are you doing? Helping after childbirth is the mother's job." I immediately heard his angry voice. Labor started. The baby was born. The first words to me, left out of this important moment, were, "What are you doing? Hurry back." Of course, I want to help Alana and see my grandchild. But how long do I plan to continue this life with Lawrence? Maybe I've reached my limit. Ah, that's right. Understood. The real mother is on her way. What? I hung up without answering and stood up. Where is the place I feel most at ease? As I was hanging the laundry, I saw a cat yawning comfortably on the stone wall, and I thought about it. Lately, it feels like I've been spending more time looking out the window as a form of escapism from these unresolved feelings. I used to have the most fun just being with friends. Just seeing everyone's faces made me feel at ease. I nostalgically remembered my high school days, long ago. I am Kristen. I don't have a place where I can truly relax. Even at home, my mind is constantly occupied with doing all the housework perfectly, leaving no time to rest. Excuse me. Can I go buy some sauce and eggs? Sure, what time and which store are you planning to go? Oh, around 2 p.m. to that supermarket. Even though we've been living together for so long, I still get nervous having conversations because I have to be overly mindful. That's because my husband Lawrence can be quite a controlling husband. It's expected to prepare breakfast before waking him up, to have dinner and a shower ready before he comes home. Asking for permission to go shopping is a norm in our household. If I went out without asking, not only would he be in a bad mood, but who knows what would happen. I don't have the courage to go out without asking, so I just do the daily chores without upsetting Lawrence. And ending each day without knowing what peace feels like has become my daily routine. Having lived isolated from the outside world for so long, now in my late middle age, the thought of divorce scares me. When I first married Lawrence, I loved cooking his favorite meals and eagerly awaited his return. I felt happy taking care of him, from offering words of appreciation to preparing his pajamas and work clothes. I felt like loving him by being attentive and devoted. I made something light for you today. My stomach was feeling heavy. Thank you. Lawrence would always thank me for everything I did, making me feel even more fulfilled. But those happy times didn't last very long. Even though we lived our lives the same way as always, Lawrence became less and less appreciative of what I did. His gaze turned critical, and he no longer tolerated even the smallest mistakes. My life changed dramatically from that day. It was right after I finished preparing dinner when I realized I had forgotten to buy toilet paper. Lawrence wasn't due back yet, and since the store was close by, I decided to run out quickly to get it. I managed to get the shopping done and hurried back home. Huh? The door is unlocked. Panicking, I rushed inside to find that Lawrence had come home earlier than expected. Hey, where have you been? You're home early today. Answer me. Where were you and what were you doing? I went to the store to buy some toilet paper because we ran out. Lawrence was in an unusually bad mood. It was still early in the evening, a time when even teenagers wouldn't be expected to be home yet, but he couldn't tolerate that I wasn't there. I regretted not letting him know to avoid worrying him. I'm sorry. I should have called to let you know. Leaving the house without telling me is unacceptable. From now on, no unnecessary outings. You must get my permission for everything, even shopping. I couldn't tell if he said this in a fit of anger or if he truly meant it. But I didn't want to upset him further, so I apologized and tried to calm the situation. However, from that day, the control over my life became much stricter. Before, I would combine necessary shopping with personal errands, but even that was now deemed unnecessary. Going out for coffee with friends was out of the question. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage, with Lawrence controlling all aspects of my freedom. Since everything was monitored, I often wondered why I had to endure such treatment. Naturally, my love for Lawrence began to fade. Despite this, I had something in my life that I was fully committed to. That was raising my only daughter, Alana. Separated from the outside world and living a constrained life, Alana was my everything. Mom. I remember how overjoyed I was when she first called me. As she started school, I spent my time attending parent-teacher meetings, school events, and driving her to and from extracurricular activities. Lawrence showed no interest in Alana's school activities or extracurriculars and didn't help at all, so I handled everything. Despite living a life so centered around Alana, she only listened to what Lawrence said. Teenage girls can be difficult to handle. Even so, her distant attitude broke my heart. Alana's attitude didn't change as she entered high school. Alana, stop by my place after school tomorrow. Okay, got it. As she settled into high school life, Lawrence began calling Alana to his workplace more frequently. Lawrence ran a construction business passed down through generations. Being the third generation, Lawrence saw Alana as the only potential successor. He probably intended for Alana to take over the business one day. I've never seen Alana rebel against her father. I found myself envious of their close relationship. I thought Alana would work well with Lawrence. But I wondered if Alana had other aspirations or dreams she wanted to pursue. Since she didn't talk to me much, I couldn't ask her about school or her future plans, even though I was curious. As she approached 11th grade, the time to finalize her future path drew near. Lawrence was calling Alana to his workplace more frequently than before. This week, she had already gone 3 days in a row. After dinner, Lawrence headed for a shower, and with Alana still in the living room, now was my chance. "Hey, Alana. It's almost time for your career counseling, right? How are you thinking about your future? Today, I really want to talk to Alana about her future plans. I want to ask if she has a specific career in mind." Contrary to my intentions, I carefully chose these words, hoping they would make it easier for Alana to answer without feeling uncomfortable. After a short pause, Alana finally responded, "I think I'll work at Dad's company." Without making eye contact, Alana said this. I wanted to continue the conversation, but I couldn't see her expression, so I didn't have the courage to say anything more, and the conversation ended there. Just then, Lawrence came out of the shower and crossed paths with Alana. "Alana, you can come by tomorrow too, right? I have something after school tomorrow. Do you think you can get a job with that attitude? I'll come by a little late, but I'll be there." I thought he was asking too much of her, but it wasn't my place to say anything. I felt sorry for Alana, but I couldn't say anything since I was only listening from a distance. A few days later, when I passed by Alana doing her homework in the living room, I saw a career sheet indicating she would take over Dad's company. Alana seemed to feel some pressure from her father and had no choice but to make up her mind. I couldn't help but think that if I had more influence, Alana might have pursued a career she loved. But if Alana genuinely wanted to take over the company, I wanted to support her. And so, after graduating high school, Alana joined Lawrence's company. At first, she seemed exhausted from the unfamiliar environment, but she gradually got used to it. Since we didn't talk about work at home, I couldn't tell how she was doing. All I could do was put my heart into preparing lunch and dinner to give Alana some strength. That's all I could do for her. A few years after starting her job, Alana apparently got a boyfriend at work. Lawrence seemed to like him a lot. "Tomorrow, my boyfriend is coming for dinner." "Really? Does he have any food preferences?" "I don't think so." "Okay, I'll prepare something by tomorrow then." Her curt response still made me happy because we could have a normal conversation. And even more so, I was thrilled that Alana was bringing her boyfriend home. I felt excited to put extra effort into tomorrow's dinner. Before bed, I did a little prep work and fell asleep with excitement. The next day, Lawrence, Alana, and her boyfriend came home together. Alana's boyfriend seemed very serious and friendly. Lawrence was happy to have his subordinate at our house and enthusiastically talked about work, drinking more than usual. I just watched them talk about work with a friendly smile. Alana's boyfriend tried to talk to me several times, but Lawrence's conversation never stopped, so he left without us having a proper conversation. He seemed like a really nice person. I said to Alana, who was helping with the cleanup, but she didn't seem to hear me over the sound of washing dishes. As time passed, Alana and her boyfriend decided to get married. With the marriage, Alana moved out, and it was just Lawrence and me again. Even with just the two of us, things were the same as always, with Lawrence managing everything, and our days were the same as before. The only change was that I had one less person to prepare lunch and dinner for. Today, we're having a meeting with Alana and her fiancé, so prepare dinner. Understood. Alana and her fiancé were getting married in 2 months. They were coming over tonight to discuss and plan the wedding. While thinking about the dinner menu, I smiled as I imagined Alana in her wedding dress. She must look so beautiful as a bride. I wonder what kind of wedding it will be. I'm really looking forward to it. I prepared for their visit while thinking about this. I'm home. Seeing Alana for the first time in a while, I was relieved to see she seemed as lively as ever. Let's talk after we eat for now. After saying that, Lawrence, Alana, and my husband started talking after dinner. I quickly finished cleaning up, intending to join the conversation, but it progressed so quickly that I couldn't find an opening to join in. I felt like I was being left out. Sitting beside them, I just listened in bewilderment to the conversation I couldn't follow. In the end, I was neither consulted nor involved in any discussions until the day of the wedding. But I told myself that just being able to attend the wedding and see my daughter in her dress was enough, and I headed to the venue. The ceremony began, and Alana appeared in her wedding dress. Wrapped in a pure white dress, Alana looked incredibly beautiful, beyond words. Lawrence, sitting next to me, was also gazing at Alana with a look of satisfaction. Alana, whom I had raised like my own daughter, was finally leaving the nest to start her own family. I felt a mix of happiness and sadness, a strange feeling. To think that little Alana had grown up so beautifully and was showing us her stunning dress. I was so moved I couldn't let go of my handkerchief. A few years after the emotional ceremony, Alana decided to move nearby and set up a new home. And it seems Alana's baby is due in the fall. Really? We're finally going to have a grandchild. Hearing the double good news from Lawrence about Alana moving nearby and having a baby made me ecstatic. In the midst of my joy, I felt a tinge of sadness that Alana hadn't told me directly. But that didn't matter compared to how happy I was. Even Lawrence, who usually doesn't show much emotion, seemed happy. Although Alana still acted distant towards me, just knowing she would be living nearby gave me peace of mind. No matter how distant she might act, or even if she didn't like me, she was still my precious daughter. I wanted to support her and help her whenever she needed it. That's how I felt as a mother. As the heat of summer continued, Alana and her family finished moving. Although they started living nearby, they didn't visit often, so it didn't quite feel like they were close. Around that time, I received a letter addressed to me in the mail. I recognized the sender's name but couldn't clearly remember who it was. I decided to open the letter. It was an invitation to a high school reunion. The sender was a high school classmate. No wonder the name looked familiar. A reunion, huh? I wonder how everyone is doing. I'd love to see them again. I reminisced about my high school days while looking at the letter. The reunion would be held locally after a long time. My hometown is a flight away, not exactly close. It would take a few days to go and come back, so a day trip wasn't feasible. The reunion date was 2 weeks before Alana's due date. I'd have to leave home for a few days, and Alana's due date was approaching. I wanted to attend the reunion, but I hesitated. And even if it was for a reunion, I wasn't sure if Lawrence would allow me to go out. It took a lot of courage for me to bring it up with Lawrence. I thought he would say no, but I decided to mention the reunion. Hoping he wouldn't get upset, I decided to talk to him during dinner. "Honey, I need to talk to you." The moment I said that, I met Lawrence's gaze and felt nervous. I felt a cold sweat coming on. Pretending not to be agitated, I continued. "There seems to be a high school reunion in October. But I would be away for a few days, and Alana's due date is close. I couldn't say I wanted to go outright, so I mumbled. Lawrence's reaction was unexpected. "That's fine. Of course, you should go." He said it in an unusually calm voice. I was surprised by Lawrence's response, thinking he would surely object. "Really? Is it okay? But what about Alana?" "Don't worry about the details. Just go." He readily agreed to me going to the reunion. I was delighted to see a glimpse of the gentle Lawrence from the past. I couldn't wait for that day to come. Then, the day before the reunion, Lawrence drove me to the station. "Take your time and relax." I was a little taken aback by Lawrence's unexpected words. But I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of being free for the first time in a long while. With Lawrence's usual expressionless face behind me, I headed towards the boarding gate. The view from the plane is one of my favorite sights. As I watched the scenery flow by and reminisced, I suddenly arrived at my hometown. The next day, on the way to the reunion, I saw some kids from my old school, which made me feel nostalgic. "Hey, long time no see. Do you remember me?" In the middle of the reunion, a woman approached me. "Oh, long time no see. Of course, I remember you. How have you been?" Her name was Brianna, Lawrence's ex-wife. Brianna was a classmate in high school, and Lawrence was an upperclassman at the same school. I had feelings for Lawrence since I was in high school. But eventually, Lawrence started dating Brianna. I continued to secretly like Lawrence even while they were dating. When I heard they got married, I accepted it with a sense of resignation but was also shocked. Still, I couldn't give up my feelings for Lawrence. Years later, while visiting my hometown, I coincidentally ran into Lawrence, who was also visiting. There, I learned that he had divorced Brianna, and we found out we both lived in the same city far from home. We grew close quickly and eventually got married, fulfilling my long-held feelings. More importantly, look at this. "Kristen, shouldn't you be with her?" Brianna showed me her smartphone screen. On it was a picture of Alana holding a newborn baby. Next to them stood Lawrence, all of them looking happy together. "What? When was this photo taken? What's going on? It was posted yesterday." What Brianna showed me was a photo on Alana's social media. The birth had happened earlier than expected, and I started to panic inside. From the photo, Alana looked healthy. I was relieved to see that she had given birth without any problems. Thinking I must have gotten a notification about the birth, I checked my smartphone. There's no message. Neither Lawrence nor Alana had contacted me at all. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. Could it be that the reason Lawrence had so readily let me attend the reunion was because he didn't want me to be present for Alana's birth? Did he deliberately send me away when he knew it would coincide with her due date? Allowing me to go to the reunion was so out of character for Lawrence, who usually monitored my activities so strictly. I should have suspected something was amiss. I called Lawrence. "Alana gave birth, I heard. Why didn't you tell me? If you had informed me as soon as she went into labor, I would have rushed back immediately." Lawrence responded calmly. "Well, you're not blood related, so it doesn't concern you, does it?" I was at a loss for words, shocked that he would bring up blood relations. We had lived together for so many years, become like a real family, and yet I was still considered an outsider. "But I've been the one taking care of Alana all this time. I've spent more time with her than you have. It doesn't matter. Alana didn't want you there either." Hearing that Alana didn't want me there was a blow, and I hung up the phone feeling deeply hurt. Yes, Alana's biological mother was Brianna, not me, the one standing right in front of me. But since the day I married Lawrence, I had tried to be a mother to Alana, giving her all the love I could muster. And until she reached her teenage years, I thought we had been as close as a real mother and daughter. It pained me deeply to realize that all my efforts and love had not reached her. Let's talk once the reunion is over. With that, I left the reunion with Brianna. Sitting on a park bench, I told Brianna about Alana not wanting me to be there. It's good for a father and daughter to be close, but she became distant with me around middle school. I thought it was just a phase, but even as an adult, she hasn't changed. I could never understand why, and I've never talked about it with anyone. It felt good to finally express my feelings about Alana. Do you know why I divorced Lawrence? I work as a lawyer, and I continued working even after Alana was born. Brianna began to share her story from when Alana was born. When Alana started preschool, my career was taking off, and I was away from home a lot. At that time, I was earning more than Lawrence. But he didn't like it. Lawrence seemed to feel inferior as Brianna's career surpassed his own. He claimed my work was affecting Alana's upbringing and tried to make me quit. But I didn't want to give up my job, so I brought up the idea of divorce. I planned to raise Alana on my own. However, Lawrence had no intention of giving Brianna custody. Lawrence apparently used his authority and influence to manipulate Alana into choosing him. Young Alana, not understanding she was being manipulated, chose to live with her father instead of her mother. When Alana told me, "Mom doesn't love me. I'm happier with Dad," it was a severe shock. Even if it wasn't her true feelings, a child's words can cut deeply. For a mother who gave birth to and loves her child, it must have been unimaginably painful. Believing Alana's words, Brianna decided to divorce and give up custody. But she admitted she had always regretted it. What? That happened? I had no idea. That's terrible. I couldn't hide my shock at learning how Lawrence had manipulated young Alana against Brianna, leading to their divorce. But when I heard he remarried you, I felt a bit relieved. You're kind and I knew you could handle it. I thought my role was done. Alana is grown up now, and seeing you now made me want to reach out. Brianna and I shared our pasts that were hard to talk about, and it eased some of my worries. Suddenly, my phone rang loudly. It's from Lawrence. I wanted to talk more with Brianna, so I decided not to answer. Brianna, can I tell you something? I told her that Lawrence wouldn't allow unnecessary outings, that I had to get his permission for shopping locations, times, and contents, and that I couldn't argue back. What? That's unbelievable. That's completely abusive. You could definitely sue him. Brianna was shocked at how much more extreme Lawrence's behavior was compared to when she was married. She was very indignant, as if it were her own situation, and couldn't hold back her feelings. Alana's attitude towards you is definitely his fault. Let's go talk to him together. I can't stand that he's treating you like this. Just as she stood up, my phone rang again. It was Lawrence again. I answered, and he immediately started speaking. Hey! What are you doing? Helping after childbirth is the mother's job. When are you coming back? He was trying to push the motherly duties on me, even though he said I wasn't real family earlier. He had told me to take my time and relax, yet now he was being selfish again, and I couldn't help but sigh. I always knew he was overbearing and selfish, but at this point, there were no words left. Understood. The real mother is on her way. What? What are you talking about? Just come back and take care of things. I hung up without responding. On the way home, Brianna and I continued talking. Do you plan to keep living like this? If you decide to divorce, I'll fully support you. It's my specialty. Leave it to me. I've thought about divorce a few times, but at this age, and being isolated for so long, I lacked the courage. But with you around, I feel stronger. I'm not thinking about divorce right now, but if it comes to that, will you help me? Of course. But for now, let me give him a piece of my mind. Talking like that, we arrived home. Lawrence, expecting only me, looked a bit surprised when Brianna appeared behind me. Oh, when you said the real mother, you meant Brianna. After abandoning your kid, what do you want now? Lawrence spoke arrogantly towards Brianna. You really need to fix your attitude and personality. Let me tell you something. Huh? With a face full of anger, Brianna criticized Lawrence. Why are you trying to ruin Kristen and Alana's relationship? You're destroying what Kristen has built. Do you enjoy controlling Alana? Do you think she'll respect you for this? What blood ties? You're far more unfit as a father. It wasn't just 1 or 2 words, it was much more. But Lawrence tried to make excuses, but Brianna didn't give him the chance. And, you may not realize it, but you manipulated Alana to gain custody, didn't you? And now you're forcibly restricting Kristen's life. That's called confinement. But you know, I can always demand compensation through divorce court for everything you've done so far. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. Just spare me from compensation through divorce court. I've wronged Brianna, Kristen, and Alana. I'm truly sorry. I'm begging you. Lawrence, overwhelmed by Brianna's words, uncharacteristically admitted his faults and apologized sincerely. As I listened to Brianna's words and watched Lawrence apologize sincerely, I could only nod in agreement. Lawrence, in his repentant state, seemed somewhat smaller. Brianna, thank you for this. I feel a bit relieved. I thanked Brianna, exchanged contact information, and we parted ways. The next day, I went to visit Alana alone. Alana, congratulations on the baby. Can I come in? Mom, you came. Yes, come in. Look at this. On the screen of the smartphone Alana showed me. I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me. It said. It seemed that Lawrence had genuinely reflected on the events of the previous day and had also apologized to Alana. I briefly explained the events of the previous day, being careful not to touch her postnatal body. So that's why he apologized. Dad had always told me not to talk to Mom or get close to her, and if I didn't listen to him, he'd get really mad at me in secret. I wanted to talk to you more like before, but I was too scared to go against him. I'm sorry for treating you badly all this time. I'm sorry too for not noticing and helping you. I thought you hated me. Alana and I held hands, tears welling up as we talked, bridging the emotional distance that had grown between us. I really wanted you to be there when the baby was born, but I couldn't tell Dad, and I felt so lonely. But thank you for coming. With that, Alana handed me the baby. So small, yet so warm and with a certain weight to it. I felt the love and warmth as I cried. After Alana is discharged, I plan to stay with her family for a while to help with postnatal care. During that time, I will carefully reconsider my relationship with Lawrence. I can't easily forgive Lawrence for what he has done to me, Brianna, and Alana, and I still feel anger. However, I also want to accept the weak part of Lawrence that tries to control others because he lacks confidence in himself. When I told Brianna this, I'm always ready to file a lawsuit, you know, she said enthusiastically. I couldn't help but laugh at her determination. Then, sometime later, at Alana's request, I arranged a meeting for Brianna and Alana to reunite. Alana, I'm sorry for making you feel lonely. I can't ask for forgiveness, but please know that you are important to me. Mom, back then, I really did like you. The reunion after all those years was a bit awkward, but there was a nostalgic air about it. That night, Alana whispered softly, I'm lucky to have two moms who care about me. Alana and I have a relationship as genuine as any biological parent and child. Even without a blood connection, I never imagined we could build such a happy family. Living with Alana and my grandchild now, I feel very happy. I think Millie's been getting a bit cocky because I haven't been strict enough. She still complains about every little thing and throws fits when things don't go her way. I'm so tired of dealing with her. Yeah, I get that. Lately, because of what Elena said, Carlton and Bridget have been giving us a hard time. Maybe we should just put her in a care facility and be done with it. That sounds good to me. It's rare that we agree on parenting. I'll start looking for a residential care facility for her. Please do. I can't wait to be free from the hassle of taking care of an autistic child. I had just come back parents' home and overheard my parents having this unbelievable conversation. Hearing my parents call Millie and me troublesome kids made me furious. More than anything, I couldn't forgive them for calling Millie a hassle and planning to put her in a facility. Then I'll take care of her. I couldn't hold back any longer and burst into the living room, shouting at my parents. You were eavesdropping? Yes. I heard everything about the facility. I won't let you do that. And how do you plan to take care of her? You're still a college student. I'll figure out the money. I won't leave Millie with people like you. You think you can do it? Maybe it's for the best. She'll learn how hard it is to be with Millie and realize how powerless she is. She won't defy us anymore. So it's like tough love. I like it. Fine, take her. But you said you'd handle it. We're not helping at all. Once you realize how tough it is, you'll thank us. I slammed the living room door in frustration, seething at my parents' smug faces. They expected me to give up. Knowing that, there was no way I could ever send Millie back to them. For Millie, I was ready to face any hardship. But it was my parents who would regret it in 10 years. My name is Elena. I'm 19, and I've just started college. Leaving home for college, I didn't move out on my own. Now, I live with Millie. Millie is 6 years younger and still in middle school. Living together as a college student and a middle schooler, people sometimes mistake us for kids from a complicated family without parents. But that's not the case. Our parents are very much alive. However, with their major issues and Millie's minor ones, I decided to live with Millie. This toothbrush is the wrong color. Oh, sorry. The old one was worn out, so I got a new one. Is this color not okay? No. It has to be blue. Got it, wait here. I'll run to the grocery store. I stopped making breakfast and hurried to the local grocery store to get a blue toothbrush for Millie. You might wonder if this is necessary, but it is. If I don't get the blue toothbrush, Millie might have a meltdown. Millie has autism spectrum disorder and is very particular about certain things. So, her insistence on a blue toothbrush isn't just being fussy. It was my mistake to buy a different color because the store didn't have blue. I'm heading out. All right, have a good day. Millie waved cheerfully and headed off to school. It was a usual sight. Since my classes started from the second period today, I took my time with breakfast after seeing Millie off. Millie has autism, but she goes to school just like other kids. There is a support staff at school, so I feel at ease. At first, I was worried about living alone with Millie, but we've managed without any major issues and live peacefully. Every day was like a battle till I obtained the peaceful breakfast time like this. Millie wasn't the cause. The main issue was my parents. We discovered Millie's autism when she was a baby. You can wait quietly? You're such a good girl. Is she behaving again? Yes, even when I stop holding her, Millie doesn't cry at all. Elena cried a lot and was a handful, remember? Did I really cry that much? Mom and Dad doted on Millie. When parents focus too much on the younger child, the older one might feel neglected. But I was already in elementary school when Millie was born, 6 years apart. So, I quickly understood why they adored her so much. Besides, I was also charmed by Millie's cuteness. But my parents were concerned because Millie was too well behaved. She doesn't cry even with a dirty diaper. She can crawl now, but she doesn't move around much. Even when we hold her, she doesn't react. As a child, I found it strange that my parents were worried despite Millie being so good. After a while, my parents took Millie to the hospital, where they found out she had autism. At that time, Millie was just a baby who couldn't do much, so autism didn't change our daily life. My parents continued to adore Millie without doing anything differently. They told me about Millie's autism, but as an elementary school kid, I didn't understand what it meant. However, problems started to arise when Millie entered preschool. What's Millie crying about? She got bitten by a mosquito at preschool today. She scratched it until it bled. She injured herself by scratching and can't stand the pain? This is really tough. She's been like this at preschool too. Other kids say she's noisy. She can't sit still during group activities and causes a scene, right? Exactly. Every day, the teachers tell me about Millie's troubles. The other day, she even hit a teacher who tried to discipline her. If this continues, they might ask her to leave. Wouldn't it be better to withdraw first? That might be true, but... While I was playing my game, my parents had a serious discussion at the table. They thought I was still a child and discussed complex issues in front of me. But children understand more than adults think. I grasped most of their conversation. And I thought, leaving because it's embarrassing? Not because she's bothering the teachers and other kids? It seems like Millie's autism had been communicated to the preschool. However, Millie rarely threw tantrums at home, so my parents thought it was just a stronger phase of defiance. But living in a group setting was too stressful, and Millie was causing more trouble at preschool than they had anticipated. It seems that at this rate, Millie won't be able to continue attending preschool. And that's not the only problem. If Millie can't go to preschool, then does that mean I can't go back to work even though I just resumed working? Should I quit my job instead? You can't handle taking care of Millie. Stop saying things like that. As Millie learned to wait for me quietly, the incidence of her causing a fuss decreased. However, as Millie advanced in school, the situation changed slightly again. I told you I don't want this. Shut up. Clothes are clothes. Just wear it without complaining. I want to wear the green one today. That one's old and I threw it away. From the morning, Millie and Mom were arguing loudly. Mom had bought new clothes for school, but Millie didn't like them. When I looked at Dad, he stopped eating breakfast, looked annoyed, and stood up. I thought he would mediate, but he just left for work. I wished he could meet my expectations. Millie, do you want to wear mine? It's green and similar in style. Okay. I'll settle for that. When I showed Millie the green clothes from my room, she reluctantly agreed. It seemed any green clothes would do. Millie had strong preferences about colors and orders, and when she reached middle school, she started asserting these preferences verbally. She only liked blue toothbrushes and apparently chose her clothing colors based on the day of the week. She also insisted on doing her homework only after dinner and that she had to take her shower first. Millie would make a fuss whenever things didn't go exactly her way with these matters. It wasn't a big deal and we just needed to accommodate her, but moms seemed to find it bothersome to cater to Millie's quirks, leading to more clashes between them. As a result, I'm home. Huh? Where's Millie? She was being loud again, so I told her not to come back until dinner time and kicked her out. What? So where did Millie go? I don't know. You're kidding! I can't believe this! I rushed out of the house in a panic. A middle schooler should be able to go out and play on her own. But Millie has autism. There's no telling what could happen and where. Millie refuses to go anywhere except along her set route and paths she's walked before, so I decided to retrace the route Millie takes between home and school. Oh, thank goodness. You were here. I thought you'd come here, Elena. Millie was sitting quietly on a bench in the park located between our house and her school. She seemed to have predicted that I would retrace her school route. I took Millie's hand and we returned home together. When we got home, Dad was back from work. I know it's pointless to tell Mom, so I explained the situation to Dad. But I'm not expecting much from Dad either. I told you, I'm leaving you kids to Mom, didn't I? Don't come whining to me about every little thing. I'm not shocked since I wasn't expecting anything in the first place. That night, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. As I headed to the bathroom, I noticed the light was on in the living room and I could hear my parents' conversation from inside. Why do you dump everything about the kids on me? I'm tired from work. You quit your job, so of course it's natural for you to look after the two of them, isn't it? What's natural about that? If you're going to act so high and mighty, why don't you earn enough so we don't need my dad's financial support? Aren't you ashamed that we've been relying on support ever since I quit my job? If you're going to say that, then why don't you go work part-time? You complained when you quit your job, didn't you? Millie's older now and goes to school, so you can work now, can't you? What if something happens at school? I'm the one who has to deal with complaints from the teachers when I can't get there right away. As usual, my parents were fighting about us in the living room. Listening to their conversation makes me feel like I'm being treated as a burden, and it doesn't feel good. But I overheard some useful information, so I'll try not to let it bother me. The next day, I called our grandparents Carlton and Bridget and asked them to scold my parents. Apparently, we've been receiving financial support from our grandparents ever since Mom quit her job. In that case, my parents shouldn't be able to defy our grandparents. My plan seemed to work, and Mom stopped locking Millie up or kicking her out. I feel like her clashes with Millie have decreased a bit too. Dad also stopped dumping everything on Mom and started doing things when asked. But it's clear that they're both reluctantly doing it because our grandparents told them to. It shows in their expressions and attitudes. At this rate, I think there's a possibility they could revert back to how they were before. I resolved to take Millie away from this house once I started working. But it seems that was too late. When I became a college student, I started living on my own. The plan was to get used to living independently, then call Millie to join me once I got a job. I was worried about leaving Millie at home, but I thought our parents should be okay for a while after being scolded by our grandparents. However, I tried to go home as often as possible and asked our grandparents to check in on them from time to time. What a pathetic pair of parents, being monitored by both their own parents and their child. One day, I returned to my family home and decided to spend the night before heading back. That night, I woke up again needing to use the bathroom and overheard my parents' conversation in the living room once more. The contents of their discussion were unbelievable. "Now that I've stopped scolding Millie, I think that girl is getting a bit carried away. She's still nagging about every little thing, and if I don't accommodate her, she'll start making a fuss. It's still such a hassle. I'm tired of raising this kid." True. Lately, we've been getting an earful from Carlton and Bridget because of what Elena said. "Let's just put Millie in a facility and make our lives easier." That's a good idea. It's rare for you to have a same opinion on child-rearing matters. All right, I'll look into residential facilities for the disabled. Please do. I'll finally be free from dealing with an autistic child. Anger welled up inside me upon realizing that my parents considered my sister and me to be burdens. Above all, I couldn't forgive them for calling Millie a hassle and trying to put her in some facility. "Then I'll raise her." Unable to contain myself, I found that I had flung open the living room door and declared this to my parents before I knew it. "You were listening?" "Yes, I heard everything, including the part about putting Millie in a facility. I won't let you do that." "You say you'll raise her, but how do you plan to do that? You're still a college student, you know?" "I'll figure out the money somehow. I can't leave Millie with the likes of you." "Listen, even if you say that." As Dad and I were talking, Mom tapped Dad's shoulder and joined the conversation. "It's fine, isn't it? Once you experience the difficulties of being with that girl and realizes your own powerlessness, you won't be able to defy us anymore, right? You mean it'll be a good lesson for her?" "That might not be a bad idea." "All right, got it. Take Millie with you. But remember, you said you'd take care of her yourself. We won't lift a finger to help. You'll appreciate us once you understand just how challenging it is." Irritated by my detestable parents' expressions, I slammed the living room door shut without another word. Starting the very next day, I immediately began preparations for Millie's move, and within 2 weeks, we started living together. It would be a lie to say I had no anxieties about a college student like myself living together with my autistic sister Millie. Even so, I couldn't leave Millie with those parents. I reaffirmed my determination to continue living with Millie in a way that would never let my parents have their way. However, once I started living with Millie, things went surprisingly smoothly. Millie is very well behaved. She shows particular preferences about things like the clothes she wears and the food she eats, but that's been the case since she lived at home. Come to think of it, I remember seeing her playing with friends when she was in elementary school. By the time she reached the upper grades, there were hardly any calls from the school about troubles. Even when Mom locked her up at home, she quietly waited for me to return, and when she was kicked out, she predicted my actions and waited for me at the park. The only time Millie would make a fuss was when she was at home, mainly with Mom. Finding this strange, I decided to look into autism a bit more thoroughly than I had before. That's when I realized something. This made sense. It's been a year since I started living with Millie. I'm off. Okay, have a good day. Millie waves energetically as she heads to school. It's the usual scene. My lectures start from the second period today, so after seeing Millie off, I leisurely enjoyed my breakfast. Freed from our parents, Millie's personality has become much brighter. Compared to when she lived at home, Millie seems like a different person. One time, Millie and I tried to predict what would become of our parents in the future. What do you think will happen to Dad and Mom, based on your predictions, Elena? Mom complained when she quit her job, but now she's not even working part-time, right? Since the support from grandparents stopped after we left home. I guess they'll have a tough time in their old age without any savings. I think it'll be even more miserable for them. Why? Because I've observed our parents more closely than you, Elena, so I understand them well. It seems Millie believes our parents will face an even more terrible future than I anticipate. I thought Millie's own wishes might be mixed in with her prediction, but she ended up winning this guessing game. 10 years later. I was 29, and Millie was 23. We've moved since then, but I still live together with Millie. One Sunday, while Millie and I were relaxing at home, we suddenly heard a loud knocking at the front door. The person was pounding on the door instead of ringing the doorbell, so Millie and I both felt terrified and trembled together. However, upon hearing the voice coming from the entrance, our fear vanished in an instant.
Elena! Millie! You live here, don't you? My mom told me. Open up, please!
Millie and I let out a sigh filled with both relief and exasperation, then headed to the front door together. Making such a commotion would disturb the neighbors, so we decided to at least let Mom into the entryway for now. This was probably just as Mom intended. She likely thought that simply ringing the doorbell would get her turned away. Ah, Elena, Millie, it's been a while. Look how splendid you've become. When we opened the door, Mom tried to barge right into the house, so Millie and I blocked her with our arms outstretched.
Hey, what do you think you're doing, trying to enter without permission?
Huh? It's fine, isn't it?
If you want to talk, we'll hear you out here for now.
Is that so? Mom took a step back and took a deep breath with her hand on her chest. She seemed somewhat nervous. Then she apologized to us with great vigor. I'm truly sorry. I was out of my mind 10 years ago. I think I was especially horrible to Millie. Millie and I exchanged glances. It's not that we were confused by Mom's sudden visit to apologize. We knew that Mom's apology was an insincere lie and that apologizing wasn't her real reason for coming.
Let me say this first. We won't live together with you. Huh? How did you know what I was going to say?
We can pretty much guess. We've heard from Grandpa and Grandma about what you've been up to. Realizing that we had seen through her true intentions, Mom made a rather awkward expression. Our parents divorced 3 years after Millie and I started living together. We had witnessed them being on bad terms many times. With us gone, leaving just the two of them, their unlikable qualities probably became even more pronounced. That's why we predicted that the day our parents would divorce wasn't far off. Since we had anticipated it, we weren't surprised when we heard about their divorce, and frankly, we couldn't care less when it came to our parents. You've been living alone since the divorce, right? Once people get a taste of an easy life without working, it's hard to break out of it.
But Grandma said that Mom has always had a personality that goes with the flow and takes the easy path ever since you were a child. So maybe that's why you found it bothersome to accommodate Millie and clashed with her so often.
Mom didn't work even after the divorce. She apparently thought a life without working was comfortable. The fact that she could live for 7 years without working after the divorce was thanks in part to the division of assets at the time of divorce, but that's not the whole story.
Still, I can't believe Dad had an affair. And apparently the woman was 10 years younger than him.
Dad was unexpectedly shrewd. The cause of our parents' divorce was Dad's infidelity. As a result, Mom got consolation money for the affair, pushed unfavorable conditions onto Dad, received a larger portion of the couple's savings, and lived off that money for the past 7 years. However, if you don't work, the money will only keep decreasing.
You've come to us because you've run out of money, right? You asked our grandparents for help first, but they turned you away, didn't they? We heard about that too. There's no way Grandma and the others would help Mom after you tried to abandon Millie. Mom must be around 58 years old now, right? You quit your job before turning 30? Even if you say you want to work now, you'll face many challenges at your age. And with your lack of motivation, you probably don't even feel like working anyway. Well, even if you start saving money now, a difficult retirement is pretty much guaranteed.
Mom fell silent from the beginning of this conversation, staring at us with a puzzled look in her eyes. It's not because we're voicing Mom's own thoughts.
Are you really Millie?
Yeah, why?
What about your autism?
I have autism, so what?
What do you mean? How are you so put together? Don't you depend on Elena to get by? That's rude. I know I caused some trouble for Elena, but I don't think I completely depend on her. I have a job too, you know. I heard from my mom that you have a job. But isn't it just some simple tasks through disabled employment? Mom, that's enough of belittling Millie. Millie disclosed her autism to the company and is working admirably as a programmer in a regular position. Millie is a programmer.
Mom's eyes widened to twice their size and her mouth hung open, astonished by the difference between Millie now and 10 years ago. Huh? I couldn't help but laugh at Mom's odd expression.
What's with that face, Mom?
Millie has high-functioning autism.
High-functioning autism?
Autism is often accompanied by intellectual disabilities. However, about 20% have mild intellectual disabilities and higher intellectual functioning. This is called high-functioning autism. Millie has autism spectrum disorder, which used to also be referred to as Asperger's syndrome or pervasive developmental disorder. But now, the terminology has been unified under autism spectrum disorder, including high-functioning autism. Mom had lumped it all together as autism, but looking closely, there are several types of autism. Millie has autism, but with mild intellectual impairment. That's why she could play normally with friends, and was quiet when we first started living together.
But didn't she constantly have problems in preschool?
That was simply because she was still immature mentally.
Wasn't she always making a fuss at home?
That's because you ignored Millie's fixations and tried to force her to listen. Apparently, Millie experiences more stress than others when she can't do what she has in mind. But it's not a big deal if you just pay attention to that stress. The things she has in mind are mostly trivial, like brushing teeth, clothing colors, the order and timing of using the bathroom. So in Millie's case, she's able to work.
Still, to be a programmer.
Millie develops strong fixations on certain things. When she took a light programming class in high school, it captured her interest. She started studying on her own outside of school. After graduating high school, she got a job at her current company and is apparently one of their top performers.
So Millie is a programmer and Elena is a nurse? Meaning you both have decent incomes?
It's not a lot, but we get by. Then you should provide some support. You need to repay me for raising you. Mom straightforwardly demanded money. However, she seemed flustered, as if backed into a corner with no concern for appearances. Such brazen people are troublesome.
Locking me up and kicking me out of the house was abuse. Since I didn't report it, let's call it even.
As I was warily facing off against the unabashed Mom, Millie swiftly rejected her words and chased her out. After closing the front door, Millie gave me a thumbs up. Getting rid of Mom made us feel a bit relieved. 3 months after Mom's visit, Dad showed up. Ah, Elena, Millie. Look how great you've grown up. I'm so sorry about 10 years ago. I wasn't in my right mind then.
I know I treated Millie especially horribly. I felt like I was watching a rerun. Dad came to apologize, but we knew his motive was the same as Mom's. We're not going to living together. We heard the stories from grandparents. Before coming here, you went to Grandma for help and got turned away. You married your mistress who was 10 years younger, but got divorced because of her reckless spending, right? And apparently, she was a parasite who dated and married men, blew through their money, then dumped them when it ran out. So she used up all your money and left you. Dad, you're 61 this year, right? Being left with nothing in your 60s must be rough. You were thrilled thinking she was 10 years younger than Mom, but too bad. Though you must have known she was divorced with a kid. Maybe you should have been more cautious instead of jumping in. Are you really Millie? I don't want to explain, so just ask Mom. I got irritated with Dad saying the same things as Mom. And the rest unfolding the same way as with Mom irked me even more. You too! Pay back the debt of gratitude for raising you! Didn't you and Mom receive support from Grandma and Grandpa? And the reason we could go to college and live together while I was a student was thanks to the money they provided. We don't owe you anything, and we already paid back the living expenses and tuition Grandma and Grandpa covered by working. Now we're trying to figure out how to repay the favors we still owe them. Millie and I kicked Dad out of the house together. Closing the front door, we both felt refreshed. You were right, Millie. Seems like they won't just have a poor retirement, but much worse. I only thought they would get divorced and cut off by us and the relatives. I never imagined they'd run out of money and hit retirement at 60 either. We laughed together at the entrance over failing to predict our parents' futures. After that, Mom seemed to give up on relying on us, not contacting or coming by anymore. However, Dad didn't give up, coming to our place many times. Even when ignored at home, he started loitering around and ambushing us outside. I had no choice but to report a suspicious person hanging around and causing trouble. Dad is a weirdo, so I don't think that's inaccurate. With a man stalking 2 women, the police took swift action. The police must have warned Dad, as he finally gave up on us. The fact that our parents tried to abandon Millie is well known among relatives through me and our grandparents, so no one will likely help them. And since the reason for their divorce was an affair, they probably won't reconcile either. They'll struggle without money, but from now on they can each slowly live out their retirement years alone. Sometime later, Millie and I started living separately. Millie was getting married. An office romance, and he apparently understands her condition. I'm a bit frustrated Millie beat me to it, but I'll congratulate her to maintain my dignity as the older sister. Hey, how much of your father-in-law's inheritance is coming my way? Dan, my husband, uttered these greed-filled words behind my back. It was right after we had finally finished the funeral of my dad, Elton, the only family I had, who had suddenly passed away. Instead of comforting me, who was drowning in sorrow, Dan casually started talking about money. Dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media and probably made a substantial income. Dan and I had a good relationship at the beginning of our marriage, and he never mentioned any desire for my dad's status or wealth. However, things started to change drastically within months. He stopped doing housework, slacked off at work, lowering his evaluation at the company, and started drinking daily, often coming to work hungover. Eventually, he became so negligent that he would miss work without notice. It seemed he had grown complacent because of my dad's money. And now, with my dad gone, Dan had finally shown his true colors. The way he trampled on my feelings of loneliness and mourning brought on an overwhelming sadness and a rage that bubbled up from the depths of my stomach. Lying face down on the bed, I told him without even looking in his eyes. There's no inheritance. I'm the child of my mom who passed away long ago, a stepdaughter. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything.
$0. Dan's face turned pale all at once.
Lies! Stepdaughter? I've never heard such a thing before.
As I spoke calmly, Dan suddenly yelled so loudly it echoed throughout the room.
You tricked me. I was looking forward to the inheritance knowing your dad was a famous lawyer. I married an ugly old hag like you for nothing. I'm divorcing you right away.
He was screaming furiously, smashing everything on the table to the floor. Stuffed animals, a photo frame from our wedding, a mirror we bought on a trip, memories of our time together shattered into pieces with loud noises. Was this the true feeling of the man I loved, with whom I shared many happy times when we first met? A mix of disappointment and disillusionment, I collapsed, powerless. I couldn't let Dan see the unstoppable smile that was about to break through. My name is Christy. I'm a 36-year-old working for a cosmetics company. My husband's name is Dan. He's 5 years younger than me, and we met at the gym we both attended. Both Dan and I work in sales at different companies. My dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media, praised as Elton, the lawyer you'd definitely want to consult. Of course, his sales and assets seemed to be quite substantial. My existence never became widely known to the public since my family never appeared in the media, but still, people around us would notice. Neighbors, acquaintances, friends, and coworkers often mentioned my dad, given his prominence. The fact that Dad was wealthy led many to mistakenly think I was financially comfortable, attracting those who were after the money. By my 20s, I was already fed up with this situation. Although I had a few boyfriends, it became clear that they were all ultimately interested in my dad's wealth. As our relationships deepened, they would say things like, "I'd like to be introduced to Elton," or "If we get married, Elton will support us, right?" Each time, I ended up breaking off the relationship. It was always about Dad. No one saw me for me. Dan approached me when I was feeling particularly jaded. He would always talk about the gym or everyday things, never once bringing up my dad during our dates. When we discussed our families, his attitude was perfectly normal. He might not even know about my dad. He seemed genuinely happy talking to me, enjoying meals at affordable restaurants or visiting theme parks, just like any normal couple would.
Just being with Christy makes me incredibly happy. Seeing you smile by my side fills me with joy. I admire that you never slack off, whether it's work, hobbies, or improving your skills.
While eating delivery pizza at his place, Dan said that to me.
I want to enjoy lots of things together with you in the future. Would you like to be my girlfriend?
Having gradually opened up to him over our dates, his words warmed my heart. This person saw me. With him, I could share a life of mutual support. Tears welled up in my eyes as the pizza in my mouth tasted suddenly salty yet somehow sweet.
Thank you. I'm very happy with you too. Please, let's be together.
He lovingly supported me as I cried uncontrollably. There were no demands for dining at fancy restaurants that hinted at my wealth, nor any eagerness to assess my family home as if appraising it. We found genuine happiness in each other's modest living spaces, sharing simple meals or delivery pizza. Filled with a sense of security, I instinctively hugged him. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and he never showed any interest in my family background. After 3 years of a very normal relationship, we got engaged. Naturally, meeting each other's parents was unavoidable. I was quite nervous about inviting him to my family home. Since he seemed unaware of my dad's identity, I feared he might get scared off upon finding out. As we waited in the living room for my parents, Dad appeared and introduced himself, causing Dan to react with surprise.
Wait, are you the Elton, the lawyer everyone wants to consult who appears on TV every week?
Dan's jaw dropped in astonishment, and Dad burst into hearty laughter.
Haha, yes, I am that lawyer. It's the first time someone has come this far with Christy without knowing me. This is quite something.
Dan, still laughing, apologized to Dad, looking somewhat embarrassed.
I'm sorry. I'm a bit clueless. Christy didn't exactly spell it out for me. To be honest, I haven't taken her to any fancy places on our dates. I'm really sorry for being disrespectful to both Christy and Elton.
Dad, smiling continuously, responded.
That's all right. You're in a relationship with, and marrying, Christy, not me. My daughter's life is her own. You don't need to worry about me at all. The most important thing is that you two support each other and live a life filled with happiness.
Dad's demeanor was gentle yet dignified, reflecting the depth of his life experience and humanity, shaped by handling various difficult cases as a lawyer and his extensive work in the media. Dan seemed moved by Dad's words, his eyes sparkling as he straightened up.
Yes, I may not be able to achieve as much as Elton or may seem unreliable because I'm younger, but I will do my utmost to make Christy happy.
Dad watched us warmly. A few months later, we managed to have our wedding and got married successfully. Some relatives commented that the wedding was small for the daughter of a well-known lawyer, but that was because Dan and I wanted to have a charming, intimate ceremony with our closest family and friends. We moved into a condominium together and started our married life as a couple. Living modestly and happily together. What kind of life would we lead? I wanted to travel together and someday have children. Aiming for a happy future, I wanted us to steadily make our way forward together. That's what I thought. But perhaps I was the only one thinking that way. A few months into our marriage, I began to notice a change in Dan's behavior. He used to help with household chores during nights and weekends, but recently he wouldn't even take care of his own things. Clothes were left strewn about, dishes were left on the table instead of being put in the sink. Before, he would have gone out to buy necessities as soon as we ran out.
Hey, we're out of milk.
But now he would just roughly tell me. And what shocked me the most was his reckless spending. He used to invest in himself by going to the gym and didn't splurge on meals or outings. As we talked about in front of Dad, the places we chose to go out to were often more affordable. That's why the joy was all the more special when he splurged a little for our anniversary. Yet now, he would casually buy expensive watches on non-special days or reserve tables at Michelin-starred restaurants he'd never taken me to, just to go drinking with friends. It was too much to overlook, so
I get wanting to splurge, but are we okay financially?
When I asked,
now that I'm married, I have to spend generously to show some presents.
He responded vaguely, saying things like,
we need to save for when we have children, and it's troubling if you keep splurging on yourself.
Even when cautioned,
it'll be fine. We'll manage somehow.
Such was his irresponsibly casual response. It was around this time that I was growing weary of Dan's lackadaisical attitude. Both his company and mine were businesses that provided a bonus as extra income during this period. There was no significant change in my bonus. If anything, it had slightly increased, perhaps as a recognition of my daily efforts. The problem was with Dan's bonus. The figures on his statement were 1 digit less than expected. Dan looked a bit upset, and when asked,
it's reduced to about 1/3 of what it was last time.
That's what he said. There haven't been any reports of significant declines in the performance of the industry or the company he works for. It was clear that the assessment was due to an issue with him personally.
Thinking about it, you've been out drinking a lot lately and coming home late. There were times you went to work hungover or overslept and were late to the office. Maybe these habits have piled up and affected your work?
I asked carefully, choosing my words, but essentially, it came down to his work attitude becoming more careless since we got married. From his daily behavior, his attitude towards work naturally becomes apparent. Given Dan's habit of constantly being late due to fooling around, it's hard to believe he could be performing well at work.
Is that so? The company seems to be struggling too, but maybe my numbers will go back to normal next time?
Despite my worries, Yudo's response was as if it were someone else's problem. There was no indication he intended to improve his lifestyle or work attitude, even with such a decrease in his bonus. Just a few weeks after that incident, one day, Dan skipped work without notice. As usual, he must have come home late at night after drinking, because even when I tried to wake him up several times the next morning, he wouldn't get up. I don't care anymore. I left those words behind and headed to my own job, but in the end, Dan never did get up on his own to go to work that day. Moreover, he apparently continued to sleep in bed all day without even bothering to contact his workplace. When I returned home and saw Dan still in bed, just as he was in the morning, I was stunned.
Did you really miss work without telling anyone?
Outraged by his irresponsible behavior as both a husband and a professional, I couldn't help but raise my voice.
I couldn't wake up. The company called, so I took the day off.
Unbelievable. The company, concerned about his absence, had taken the trouble to contact him. He had inconvenienced his workplace, leaving a gap in his responsibilities, and showed no sign of remorse. I felt hopeless facing this changed Dan, who seemed like a different person from the man I married.
So, you're skipping work without notice now. What will you do if you get fired for something like this?
I raised my voice, worried about his future, our future. The next words out of Dan's mouth were shocking.
Then, we can just borrow money from your dad.
In that moment, everything went dark before me. When had he become someone who relied on my dad's wealth? He had promised my dad to build a happy life with me, supporting each other. He used to say he was happy just being with me, enjoying our modest life. I felt foolish for believing we could be happy together. Now, it seems he's with me just for the money after all. This makes him no different from the people in my past. Do people inevitably get blinded by money? Was introducing him to my dad before our marriage a mistake? Disappointment, regret, despair, and sorrow overwhelmed me. If things continued this way, divorce might become an option. Although he stopped missing work without notice after receiving a serious warning from his company, he didn't quit his extravagant nightlife or wasteful spending. When he impulsively bought luxury brand shoes and bags without thinking, I felt fear for what might become of him. Living with this uncertainty, months passed by. Then one day, suddenly, my dad passed away. It wasn't due to an accident or incident, but a sudden illness. Naturally, Dad's professional circle and the media were in uproar, and my life became instantly busier. Having lost my mom long ago and without any siblings, my dad was my only family. I barely had time to mourn until after the funeral was over, but once everything settled, a profound sense of loss and sadness hit me. My dad, who raised me as a single father amidst his busy professional and media career, always remained calm and wise, and he was my lifelong role model. In moments of despair during exams or job hunting, I was encouraged by the sight of my dad's back, never sparing effort or learning in anything. He passed away too soon at 66. Left alone, I was grieving in my room when Dan barged in without knocking. He had barely helped with the funeral arrangements, mostly just fiddling with his smartphone in a corner while I was busy organizing everything. I had reached a point of resignation towards him and didn't even bother to scold him at that moment. As I was crying, hunched over on my bed, Dan didn't even squat down to meet my gaze but instead stood and said,
"Hey, how much is the inheritance?"
"It all comes back to money." Disgusted and without responding to his question, he approached me and raised his voice.
"How many millions are there? With all that earning, there must be a considerable amount left, right? You're the only next of kin, so we should get something, right?"
Even though my wife's dad had passed away, an indecent smirk was playing across his face. It seems he believes that with her dad gone, he's become a billionaire overnight. The thought of living lavishly without working, dangled before him, made me feel a visceral disgust towards his drooling, debased expression. Lying face down on the bed, I told him without even looking at him.
"There's no inheritance."
Immediately, Dan shouted,
"That's impossible! He died suddenly. There's no way all the money's gone."
"That's not it. I am the child of a mother who died long ago, a stepdaughter. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. $0. Indeed, I have no blood relation to the dad I respected so much. Dad never made our family matters public, partly for reasons like this."
"Lies. Stepdaughter? I've never heard anything like that."
"It's true that he raised me since I was young, and we cared for each other deeply, and my mom has been gone for a long time. I just thought it wasn't necessary to mention."
I had nothing more to say to Dan. Instead of asking him to leave, I sighed, and then Dan suddenly yelled so loud it echoed throughout the room.
You tricked me. What do you think I've been flattering you and your dad for all these years? Give me back my last few years." "What?"
I felt as if my heart stopped for a moment. Before I could even ask what he meant, he started furiously smashing everything on the table to the floor. Our memories, including stuffed animals, a photo frame from our wedding, and a mirror we bought on a trip, were shattered one after another with loud noises.
"You're so naive, thinking I was some prince who fell for you without knowing about your dad. It was all an act. There was a guy at the gym, recognized you immediately, and told me everything secretly. He said you'd likely be approached by guys after your dad's money, so if I played dumb and feigned true love, you'd fall for it right away.
What an appalling revelation. Unlike school or work, where identities are scrutinized, I had let my guard down, never suspecting that someone at the gym could betray my trust. Since no one had ever mentioned my dad at the gym, I believed Dan loved me without knowing about my dad, and I trusted him completely. But he accused me of deceiving him, when in reality, I was the one deceived. Dan clicked his tongue loudly.
Seriously? What are you going to do about this? My life plans are ruined because of you. I played the good guy for 3 years thinking I'd get an inheritance. I wouldn't have bothered with an ugly old hag like you otherwise.
His true colors showed as he mercilessly spoke his mind. My disappointment had already reached its limit, and I felt nothing but a cold emptiness inside, lacking the energy to retort.
Once the inheritance was secured, I was planning to divorce you. I've been seeing someone else for a year, planning to marry her instead and build a great life with your dad's money.
His admission of deceit was followed by a confession of infidelity. I had to respond to that. I lifted my face, opened my eyes wide, and stared intently at his face.
What did you just say? A year ago? That's around the time we decided to get married.
Yes. It had been about a year since he proposed, and we visited my dad to announce our engagement.
You didn't start cheating because we were getting married, did you? Exactly. If I'm to be with someone, it better be someone young and beautiful. I had my eye on this girl for a while. Pretty girls cost money, you know. I couldn't afford her on my salary, so I figured I'd secure the marriage with you.
What a meticulously cruel plan. He, and even my dad, were merely pawns for his trivial desires. His nights out with friends and colleagues were actually dates with his mistress. Anger made my heart race, and my fingers began to tremble.
Ah, what a loss. If there's no money, you're of no use to me. Let's just get divorced already.
He spat out those words dismissively. Facing him, I spoke calmly.
That's obvious. Who would want someone who's been lying and cheating all along? Let's divorce as soon as possible. And since you've been unfaithful, I'll be seeking alimony.
His reaction to the mention of money was immediate, but he quickly became enraged again.
Alimony! I should be the one receiving it, having been deceived all this time. And do you have proof of my cheating to show a lawyer? Any photos? Recordings? You have nothing, right?
Despite his provocation, I tried to remain composed.
You're right. Without concrete evidence, seeking alimony might be difficult. So, I won't ask for it. There's no inheritance, so no property division either. Just promise never to involve yourself with me or my family ever again. That's enough for me.
Dan, with lifeless eyes, said.
Fine by me. I never want to deal with you again.
With those words, he left the room, slamming the door loudly behind him. Later, we easily finalized our divorce after he signed the divorce papers and a written agreement not to contact me again. Losing both my dad and Dan within days left me feeling empty as I returned to my family home. Dad's presence still lingered in the room he used to live in, and I found myself crying there once more. After taking some time off work due to my dad's passing, I gradually returned to my job and began to adapt to life back at my family home, slowly regaining a sense of normalcy. About 2 weeks later, my mobile phone started ringing incessantly throughout the day. I had to keep it on silent mode and locked away in my locker at work to avoid disturbing others, but the situation was the same at home, disrupting my life. The caller was always Dan. I ignored it for several days, but due to the persistent calls, I decided to answer the phone just once. I figured that once I listened to what they had to say, these incessant calls would finally stop. As soon as I pressed the call button, Dan's furious voice exploded from the other side.
You really had me fooled, didn't you? There was an inheritance after all, wasn't there? Why didn't you give it to me?
His loud yelling was so unpleasant that I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. The TV in the room was showing the news, and I glanced at it sideways. It was about how the considerable fortune left by the recently deceased lawyer Elton had been donated entirely to non-profit organizations by his family. Dan must have seen this news and realized there indeed was an inheritance, becoming furiously enraged. There was a slight lie in my earlier statement about there being no inheritance for me as a stepdaughter. Although it was true that Elton and I had no blood relation, my parents had remarried when I was still in elementary school, and I had been legally adopted. My dad, a renowned lawyer, had prepared a will long ago, leaving all his estate to me. Of course, being drafted by a professional lawyer, it was legally impeccable. When my dad passed away, Dan was already leading a wasteful and lazy life. Fearing that revealing the inheritance would only lead him to squander it without working, I chose to remain silent.
And what about that amount? $2 million. With that kind of money, I wouldn't have to worry about living expenses ever again. Why did you keep quiet, you idiot?
Now that we were divorced and essentially strangers, he had no claim over my family's money. He seemed furious, having lost the chance to access a significant sum of money.
That's exactly why. I wouldn't want to give anything, not even a cent, to someone who doesn't work seriously and is only obsessed with other people's money.
After my firm statement, Dan let out a pitiful sound on the other end of the phone. Yuto, incredulous and persistent to the end, asked,
"Are you really telling me everything was donated? Not even a little bit left for yourself?"
Amazed at his inability to let go, I responded,
"Truly, not a cent was left. Every last bit of Dad's money has been donated. There's nothing left here."
A loud and blatant sigh of frustration came through the phone.
"You really are an idiot. Why would you donate everything? You could have had a good life if you kept it for yourself. Ah, well. I guess divorcing a stupid woman was the right choice after all."
With those parting words filled with disdain, he hung up the phone, ending the conversation unilaterally. Finally, the storm had passed. I took a deep breath and promptly blocked Dan's number, seeking to close that chapter of my life for good. In the aftermath, it seemed Dan continued his reckless lifestyle, drinking away his sorrows nightly, further deteriorating his performance and reputation at work. Furthermore, his actions post-divorce, especially marrying for an inheritance and then quickly divorcing after my dad's death, became known at his workplace, further diminishing his character in the eyes of his colleagues. Curious, I used social media to look up Dan's mistress and easily found her account. It appeared Dan had been quite generous with her while he was counting on my dad's inheritance. However, with everything gone, he could no longer afford to pamper her as before. Upon reading a post from a mistress saying,
"The guy I was seeing finally divorced his wife, but lately he's always complaining about not having any money. There are no more gifts or dinners. I was with him because he seemed like he could afford to spoil me, but I think it's time to break up."
I held my aching head. If Dan was after our money, it seems his mistress was after Dan's money. It turns out, every single one of them was greedy for money, lacking any decency. I closed the page with a stern face, deciding never to visit it again. It was about 3 weeks after my last phone call with Dan. An unexpected visitor arrived at my workplace. A colleague, looking somewhat troubled, came to fetch me, and in the hallway waited Dan, looking worse for wear than before.
"What are you doing, showing up at my work like this?"
As I spoke nervously, Dan looked at me with a sleazy grin, as if trying to charm me.
"After thinking, when your bonus went up and mine went down, you must have some savings, right? I've racked up some debt from shopping on credit and using my card for drinks. It's gotten to the point where it's affecting my living expenses. I was hoping you could help me out a bit. Please?"
I was taken aback, having never expected the conversation to turn to my finances, and my eyes widened in surprise.
"I've been using loans for shopping and my card for drinking, and now I've accumulated debt. If this continues, it'll affect my living situation. I need a little help. Come on, it's okay, right?"
Dan pleaded, clasping his hands together, "Please." His audacity to now ask for my savings, after finally giving up on my dad's inheritance, was staggering. I felt dizzy with disbelief and nearly collapsed on the spot.
"Absolutely not.
I spoke firmly, directly.
Every time you look at someone, it's money, money, money. I'm sick of it. If you want money that badly, work for it earnestly, save up, and earn it yourself. Don't give me that scary look. You really are ugly. You want to know how much debt I have? It's $20,000. The girl I thought I'd marry recently dumped me for being stingy, and now I'm at rock bottom. Can't you help me out just a bit?
He persisted, his face a picture of misery. The sight of him sulking after losing both money and women was just pitiful and ugly.
It's your own fault for recklessly depending on my family and accumulating debt on your own. Take care of it yourself. It's really bothersome, so please, just leave now.
As our heated exchange attracted attention, employees and security guards began to gather. Many of my colleagues, familiar with my dad and having attended my wedding, recognized Dan. My boss, who arrived promptly, had security escort Dan out, ensuring the situation was resolved peacefully, then assured me he would make arrangements to prevent Dan from entering the company premises in the future. Then my boss. Expressing anger towards Dan, my boss sympathized with me. Furthermore, my boss praised my diligent and accurate work performance and told me that my next evaluation would reflect positively on this. Additionally, my boss praised my diligent and accurate work performance and promised that the next appraisal would positively reflect this. Afterwards, Dan, whose lifestyle had deteriorated, started to frequently arrive late and miss work without notice, eventually leading to his dismissal from the company. Of course, he had no savings to speak of, and soon he couldn't pay for rent or living expenses, leading to him being evicted and seemingly lost on the streets. Dan, whose health had declined due to excessive drinking and who had become unkempt, was of course unable to find re-employment as a full-time employee. Somehow, he managed to find a live-in part-time job and is slowly paying off his debt with the meager wages he earns. For years, he continued to deceive a woman, and when things didn't go his way, he would become infuriated. Incapable of proper self-management, he allowed himself to drift towards easier paths, continually indulging his weaknesses. Such a self-centered, childish man is now forced to live a constrained life, gritting his teeth through hardship. Unbeknownst to Dan, I still had a secret. The condo where I lived, a property my dad left in a prime location in Tokyo, held significant asset value. After living here for a while, I'm considering finding a new place to live or, if I find a new partner someday, selling this condominium. Moreover, while it's true that the inheritance was donated, it wasn't the full amount as I told Dan. Eltonsville had stated,
"Feel free to use it as you wish, but make sure to use some for yourself too."
Knowing my interest in supporting children's charities worldwide, my dad had anticipated my decision to donate. I chose not to betray my beloved dad's wishes, and kept a portion for myself, as advised in his will. A quarter of the inheritance, amounting to $500,000, currently sits in my account. Of course, I won't spend it on brand-name goods just for show or on fleeting pleasures that hold no lasting value. I intend to use it carefully for my future, valuing its significance.
I'm taking the heir, the young master. Here's your settlement, $10,000.
As she threw the wad of cash at me, my best friend Amanda burst out laughing. Clutching her stomach, she seemed genuinely amused from the bottom of her heart.
James is crazy about me. He said you're just a plain, uninteresting woman.
I see. I gave a small nod. I had a feeling that was the case. My marriage to my husband James was not a love match. It was simply because James' father William, the chairman of a major corporation, took a liking to me and made me James' wife. Given James' personality, a woman like me must bore him to death. In contrast, Amanda has a glamorous appearance and is fun to talk to. I can understand why James likes her.
Hey, don't you want the money?
Amanda grinned, as if dangling bait in front of a stray dog. But she wasn't the only one who started laughing. The lawyer who had been silent beside me also burst into loud laughter, pointing at Amanda. My name is Dorothy. I was originally a doctor working at a hospital, but the chairman recognized my work ethic and I became his son's wife. That was 2 years ago. My husband James takes advantage of being the son of a major corporation and spends his time playing around. On paper, he has the same title of doctor as me, but I've never seen him actually treating patients.
What's wrong? Sighing like that.
It's nothing. One time, I was on the phone with my best friend Amanda while doing household chores. As I made stew in a pot, I said,
"The chairman, my father-in-law William, is coming over tonight. But James is so caught up in his playtime that he shows no sign of coming home on time. That's definitely not good."
On the other end of the line, Amanda's voice turned grim.
"I'd go look for him, but I'm not done cooking yet."
Wait a second.
Amanda sounded surprised.
Doesn't the housekeeper do the cooking?
That's how it appears to the world, but the reality is different.
I replied with a sigh. James had hired a housekeeper when he was single, and he left everything, not just cooking, to the housekeeper to take care of his personal affairs. But after marrying me, James fired that housekeeper and so, he pushed all the household chores onto me, his wife.
"You'd be bored staying home all the time, right?"
He would say with a sneer. I was perplexed. Because I had intended to continue working as a doctor after getting married. But in reality, I'm so swamped with housework that I can't leave the house. Living in a high-rise apartment may look like a dream from the outside. But the truth is, it's like being a caged bird.
"I thought you'd be living a better life. But you haven't told James' dad about this?"
How could I possibly tell him? Even if he's such a philanderer to William, James is his only son. William doesn't know the reality of our married life. So even now, thinking it's for James' livelihood, he sends money to hire a housekeeper. But all that money vanishes into funds for James to play around with.
"Getting married to someone favored by the parents sure has its hardships too,"
Amanda murmured, sounding conflicted.
"You never know what kind of man you'll end up with until you're actually married. And Dorothy ended up with a real dud in terms of character."
Her voice was mixed with pity and exasperation. Since my student days, I had been indifferent to romance. Knowing this, Amanda was likely thinking to herself, Dorothy had no eye for men. In fact, Amanda started saying things like this.
"I wouldn't make that kind of mistake though."
Mistake?
"You gotta do your research before dating someone. Men put on an act, so you can't be fooled by their nice demeanor."
Her tone was slightly condescending. We've known each other since our student days, but Amanda has this side to her. According to her, since she was born 2 months earlier, she's the senior one. But at the same time, her advice is often off the mark, including this time.
"William kept pushing ahead with the wedding preparations, so I wasn't in a position to say I wanted to break it off." "You thought about breaking it off?"
Amanda asked, sounding surprised. That's right. I had no intention of marrying James. Having stated that fact aloud myself, I was made aware of it anew.
"Why didn't you break it off then?"
Amanda, who likes to pry despite not grasping the essence of things. The stew was ready. Turning off the heat, I continued speaking.
"I felt like we weren't a good match."
What?
"So, the moment I met James, I knew I couldn't fall in love with him."
I confessed straightforwardly. At that moment, a brief silence falls. The one to break the silence was Amanda.
"You mean like intuition?"
I guess so.
"Anyway, it wasn't about his looks or personality or anything like that. I just felt James and I weren't suited to be husband and wife."
How luxurious, Amanda said with a groan.
"Then you should have given that marriage proposal to me."
I really should have. They both like flashy things, so surely Amanda and James would make a better match. Imagining it made me a little envious.
Oh, William will be here soon, so I need to set out the food. Wow, sounds rough.
After a deflated response, we end the call. Everyday life immediately resumes. James doesn't come back. With no choice, I welcome William alone.
Is James not here?
Seems he's busy with work. I have no choice but to fib. In terms of education and job title, James is an outstanding person. The reality is he pushes work onto his subordinates and doesn't even show up to the office, but William doesn't know that. So even now, he praises the food I made like this.
It's a shame I can't directly thank the person who made this meal. I'll pass along the message.
Suppressing my welling frustration, I reply. William smiles and says to me,
Then please tell them this. Thank you always for taking care of my son, and the food was delicious.
Certainly. Nodding, I secretly clench my fist. Those words should rightfully be directed at me. Later on, it seems Amanda made contact with James. Her first words over the phone were,
Dorothy's husband is handsome, huh? You met James? I mean, from what I heard, he sounds like an awful husband, right? That actually made me curious.
It was an opinion typical of Amanda with her strong curiosity. Dismayed, I still wait for her next words.
His personality didn't seem that bad, but his fake pleasantry smile was definitely suspicious. That was clearly an act. You can tell from a smile?
Hearing that, Amanda's voice took on a proud tone. I can tell. Well, there are a few other tricks too. In that manner, Amanda went on a one-sided spiel about her assessment of James, and then the call ended. In the now quiet room, I think to myself, Amanda met James. That was all there was to it. But for some reason, that fact caught in my chest and raised questions. I recall a feeling I had before. That James and Amanda would surely make a good match. No way. Shaking off the bad premonition, I returned to the housework. A housewife doesn't have the luxury to indulge in sentimentality. Even in my doctor days there were physically demanding aspects, but on top of that, housework includes manual labor too. However, this is something other housewives won't accept even if I tell them.
What? Manual labor is something the husband should do, no?
The neighborhood ladies said with a laugh, and in the first place, many families living in this class of high-rise employ housekeepers. Not being understood is painful too, huh? Once again, my hand wiping the window stops. I notice tears have welled up in my eyes.
What are you doing? Huh?
A voice from behind startles me. Looking at the clock, it was already time for James to come home. Although usually he's too absorbed in his playtime and doesn't return until late at night. Today of all days, he seems to have properly come home on time. Loosening his tie, James says,
Is dinner ready?
Sorry, I forgot. Saying that, I dash to the kitchen. Just as I'm about to open the fridge, James says in a bothered tone,
Never mind. Let's eat out today. Anything you want to eat?
Not really.
Then the nearby restaurant is fine.
Saying that brusquely, James took me to a high-end restaurant. Normally a reservation would be required, but James is a regular, so they make an exception for him.
This is the restaurant where you proposed to me.
Suddenly feeling nostalgic, I mention it.
Is that so?
His voice feigning ignorance makes me give a wry smile. Thinking he must be embarrassed, I look at his face. In that instant, disappointment flashed through my mind. James doesn't seem to remember proposing to me. With a surprised look, he says,
Didn't Dad just bring the marriage certificate and it was over once we signed it?
Maybe so. Still crestfallen, I nod. That's not true. I wasn't keen on this marriage. so I had intended to find a chance to confess my true feelings to James. I thought even William would reconsider if he heard from James that he wanted to call off the engagement. However, right before that, James called me out to this restaurant and proposed. I was shocked. It was unexpected and made me happy too. So I accepted this marriage. And yet, James, the key person, has completely forgotten about it.
Come to think of it, I met someone today who said she was your friend.
You mean Amanda?
Yeah, that was her name.
James nodded as if confirming his own memory. She was beautiful. Wasn't she?
Oh, I was surprised. She had a youthfulness that belied being over 30.
James said, sounding impressed. I figured as much. Amanda is single, but it's not like men don't hit on her. Rather the opposite, she's always blessed with new boyfriends. What did you two talk about?
Well, she got mad at me, telling me not to trouble my best friend so much.
James lowered his eyes, looking uncomfortable. That gesture was boyish and somehow charming. However, that wasn't the important part.
Amanda, what have you done? Dorothy?
Though James seemed puzzled, I was too preoccupied to care. I had told Amanda not to tell anyone. Yet she apparently shared my complaints about him to James himself of all people. You don't need to mind what Amanda said. But...
Excuse me, valued customers.
The restaurant staff approached.
We request that you please keep your voices down. Oh, okay.
Taking the opportunity of being warned, we placed our order. The chef's recommended course, it was the restaurant's signature course, with the dishes determined by the ingredients procured that day. I wonder what will come out today.
Who knows?
I excitedly awaited the food. However...
excuse me. Is there a problem?
The staff remained unperturbed, but my face had likely turned somewhat pale. What was brought out was a course meal for one person.
I'm the worst as a husband, huh?
James said as he started eating. I hurriedly denied his words.
I didn't say that much. I did grumble a bit, but Amanda's way of speaking involves exaggeration.
Don't take it seriously.
So it's true that you complained?
Hanging my head, I reply. Yes.
You can't even satisfactorily handle a single household chore, can you? Today I just happened to forget, that's all.
I always properly make meals and wait for James to come home. However, usually even if the food gets cold, James doesn't return, so I eat alone and warm up James' portion in the microwave for him to eat later. Day after day of that. It certainly lacked fulfillment. So unintentionally, I forgot to make dinner today. To be told I'm habitually neglecting housework as a result is disheartening.
I was wrong to forget to cook and to complain about you to a friend. But I don't recall deserving this treatment. We need to be quiet in this restaurant.
Ignoring my side of the story, James said that. I silently waited for James to finish eating, desperately enduring the rumbling of my empty stomach, lest I let my guard down. On the way home, despite sitting in the passenger seat, James felt so distant. In reality, his feelings had likely long since left me. While driving, James spoke.
You said it was fine to give me to Amanda, didn't you?
That's dash. That's not something I brought up. Amanda had merely said it as a joke. Before I knew it, all of Amanda's words were being twisted in a way unfavorable to me. It couldn't be that Amanda. I shake my head, denying the worst possibility. No way, because Amanda has been my best friend since our student days. She would never betray me. I desperately try to convince myself of that. However, immediately after, James said, "Can we break up?"
What?
I've decided to remarry Amanda, you see. The car stops. A figure swiftly gets into the back seat. My heart leaps. There's no mistake. The one who got in was Amanda. Casually crossing her legs in the seat, she says,
"James told you, right? If you get it, then get out of the car."
No way!
Stunned speechless, the two repeatedly told me to get out of the car. Overwhelmed by the pressure, I ended up exiting the vehicle. The car immediately speeds off. Left behind on the dark road, I stand there in a daze for a while. By the time I come to my senses, I had started crying. With a hoarse voice dried out from tears, I call a friend.
"Thomas? Due to circumstances, I can't go home. Come pick me up."
What's that about?
My friend Thomas didn't seem to grasp the situation well. Even so, he apparently sensed from my tearful voice that it wasn't an ordinary occurrence.
"Got it. I'll come get you right away. Please."
Ending the call, I crouched at the side of the road. Eventually, a single car arrives.
"Dorothy." "Thank you, Thomas."
By Thomas's car, I was somehow able to return to my parents' home. During the ride, Thomas didn't ask me about the circumstances. My parents were shocked to see me with eyes swollen from crying.
Dorothy, what on earth happened?
Actually, I began to explain the situation bit by bit. When she finished, Dad stood up, furious.
I'm going to James' parents right now to settle this. Calm down.
Thomas, the only one keeping his composure, tried to soothe Dad. Thomas was a lawyer. He likely judged that acting rashly would put me at a disadvantage.
"Can you let me handle this?" "Thomas, thank you. I'm counting on you,"
I replied, wiping away her tears. Just 3 days later, divorce papers arrived from James.
What a jerk!
Dad was angry, but James didn't marry me because he loved me in the first place. Rather than continuing a sham marriage, maybe it was better to separate, I thought. But what worried me was my best friend, Amanda. Amanda seemed intent on kicking me out and becoming James' new wife herself. In other words, the words I thought were a joke were Amanda's true feelings.
Amanda, you betrayed me.
She must have been enamored with the wealthy James over our long friendship. If that's the case, there's nothing I can do about it.
Thomas, I'm leaving this matter to you.
Got it.
Together with Thomas, I headed to James' high-rise apartment. The place was overflowing with Amanda's belongings. Amanda sat on the sofa, buried in designer handbags.
Well, look who's here. I have something to discuss too.
Oh, really?
Amanda feigned surprise. James stood against the wall, glaring at Thomas. He had disliked the elite Thomas for a while now. James likely felt inferior, knowing he only succeeded thanks to his family status. James barked like a cowering small dog.
So since I dumped you, you're moving on to that guy.
This is business.
Thomas replied calmly.
I'm here today as a lawyer for your wife.
Those words, how reassuring they were to me. The term wife reflected Tom's character of clearly separating public and private matters.
If you have a lawyer, it'll be quick, right?
Amanda opened her mouth mockingly.
You want compensation money from the divorce trial, don't you?
That's not it.
No need to hold back. Here. Saying that, she carelessly took something out and threw it at me.
I will take the heir, the young master.
Here's $10,000 in settlement money. It hit my foot, making a faint sound. It was a bundle of bills. Seeing me stunned, Amanda burst out laughing. To the triumphant Amanda, an unexpected voice came flying.
The heir is Dorothy.
Huh? A dumbfounded moment passed. Thomas started laughing as loudly as Amanda. I looked at James. He too had a look of disbelief on his face.
That's ridiculous. I'm Dad's son. That's right.
Tom nodded once, then continued his explanation.
However, this is the decision of the conglomerate's chairman, your father. Don't talk nonsense. Why would Dad?
Even as he retorted, James' face gradually turned pale. He must be thinking, it can't be. Amanda also seemed shaken by Tom's words. To the two of them, Tom said in a businesslike tone,
The chairman knew everything. What did you say?
James finally started trembling violently. It's no wonder. Looking back on his deeds up until now, they were all things that would tarnish the conglomerate's prestige. Even James must know that. And if William had grasped all those actions.
The chairman said he had been waiting for the day James would have a change of heart. But with this incident, the chairman judged that a change of heart was hopeless. Wait. I'll talk to Dad right now.
Compared to Tom's clear voice, James' voice was pathetic.
At the same time, the chairman highly valued Dorothy's dedication thus far and appointed her as the guardian of his grandchild. Grandchild? Dad doesn't have a...
James stopped mid-sentence, seeming to understand. James looked at me with a surprised face. I nodded.
William's successor isn't you. It's your child inside my belly. You never said a word about having a child,
said James, flustered.
I was going to tell you soon. I never thought I'd end up telling you like this, though.
Even as I answered, there was a sense of emptiness. James and I are already over as husband and wife. Maybe we were over from the start. In any case, I felt sorry for the child that would be born between such parents.
You said you didn't see Dorothy as a woman.
Amanda, enraged, yelled at James. Still looking bewildered, James said in a hurry,
I have an obligation to leave an heir. What will you do if that heir takes your position? I never even thought about it.
The two exploded in anger at each other. I said, exasperated,
Until this child comes of age, I will be the organization's representative. In other words, Dorothy is essentially the successor.
Tom added cleverly. James, his face pale, asked tremblingly,
So what happens to me now? Naturally, you'll have to step down from your current position. That seat belongs to Dorothy.
Saying that, Tom took out some documents from his briefcase and showed them. They all had the chairman's signature.
Oh no!
James, upon receiving and checking the documents, collapsed on the spot. The documents slipped from James' hands and fluttered in the air. Someone swiftly grabbed them. It was Amanda.
If we tear this up, it'll be meaningless,
she said, tearing the documents in anger. Yet Thomas remained unfazed.
Those documents are copies. What? The real documents are with the chairman. Now, go to the chairman. And try tearing up all the documents.
Clear provocation and contempt were contained in those words. Amanda screamed.
There's no way we can do that. Just give up,
Amanda said firmly.
It's all been decided,
Thomas stated with finality. Thomas turned on his heel. And I followed suit, starting to walk away. From behind, I heard James' weak, pleading voice.
Wait. Let's call off the divorce. That child needs a father. Right? Maybe if you were a normal dad.
I didn't even bother turning around anymore. With my back still turned, I said,
But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child. But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child. Dorothy, don't say that. I'm the kids.
He was probably trying to assert that he was the dad. Interrupting his voice, I declared,
This child has no dad. Don't be ridiculous.
His weak voice suddenly turned angry.
If it's not my kid, then they can't be the successor, right?
That's right.
That's why William made his decision. James got into a car accident and is gone now. At least, that's what Will announced to the public. What the hell is that?
Weakness and confusion returned to James' voice. Yes. That's how it should be, James.
If we reveal the truth as is, it will tarnish the prestige of the conglomerate. That's why the chairman is using the accident as a pretext to exile you and entrust everything to his grandchild. But this man is still alive,
Amanda said desperately. With my hand on the doorknob, I replied,
Why don't you turn on the TV? The news about James being in an accident should be on by now. No way!
The boldness vanished from Amanda's usually assertive voice. Thomas and I left the room. Walking side by side down the hallway, I asked,
What's going to happen to James now? Who knows? Maybe he'll be given a new identity and have to start over from scratch.
Thomas's tone had returned to its usual casual manner. His job was done. Now, my job was waiting for me. Many media outlets had jumped on the story of a former doctor who had lost her husband in an accident and would now live as the guardian of his child. After all, there was already a high level of social interest in me to begin with. An unknown doctor catches the eye of the chairman of a conglomerate and becomes his son's wife. That alone was already impactful enough.
How do you feel right now? Me? Not much. I just feel sorry for my son.
I conveyed my true feelings to the reporters pointing their microphones at me. In my arms was the newborn figure of my son, Brian.
This child doesn't like the sound of camera shutters. Sorry about that.
Brian was now an important figure who single-handedly carried the future of the conglomerate on his shoulders. I couldn't afford to draw his ire. I made my way through the waves of reporters surrounding my home. I got into the company car and headed to work.
Excuse me.
The car stopped midway and a woman got in. It was Deborah, the babysitter who would take care of Brian in my place. Thanks for your help again today.
Of course.
Nodding, Deborah held Brian close. Brian let out a happy laugh. A smile also appeared on Deborah's face.
I can't believe he's become so attached to me.
Your sincerity got through to him. When I said that, Deborah smiled. With someone like her, I can entrust my son with peace of mind. The car started moving again. My new workplace is the space James used to dominate. However, his subordinates had the worst impression of him. When I arrived at the office, one of the subordinates who had just come to work spoke to me.
Good morning, Dorothy.
Good morning. I returned the greeting in the same manner. We walked together, chatting casually.
I'm so glad you're here, Dorothy,
the subordinate said with a deep sense of relief. I gave a wry smile. Oh, you're exaggerating.
No, James just dumped all the work on us and did nothing himself. To be honest, he was a nuisance.
The subordinate's true feelings. I felt a chill in my heart. I'll work hard so I don't get the same evaluation.
Yes.
The subordinate's face, nodding in agreement, was filled with expectation and trust. For now, I'm adored by my subordinates. But it's not because I'm capable. It's simply a psychological response of expecting the next boss to be better because the previous one was so bad. I need to stay on my toes. Muttering to myself, I started my desk work. Because James had been slacking off, work was greatly stagnant. Just getting through it required a lot of time and effort. I went to see Brian after work. I could have had him wait at home, but I wanted to see Brian during my break, so I had Brian and Deborah wait in a separate room. Also, at home, we would be surrounded by reporters. Having them accompany me was also about protecting them.
Dorothy,
Where's Brian? When I asked Deborah, who had approached me, she showed me Brian in her arms. Brian was sleeping peacefully. He's sleeping so well.
he's such a good boy.
Is that so? I couldn't help thinking that it was good he didn't resemble James. Brian's features definitely had traces of James. Maybe his personality will end up being similar too. I had a moment of such anxiety. I wonder who Brian takes after. Sleeping so peacefully like this.
It's definitely you, Dorothy.
You think so? A heartwarming moment passed. It was when I left the office and headed for my ride. Dorothy. Suddenly, a man in dirty clothes leaped out from the shadows. His appearance had changed drastically, but I recognized his voice. It was James.
Stay back. Okay.
Deborah was terrified. I stood between her and Brian, guarding them from James.
What's this all of a sudden?
You ruined my whole life. The conversation was completely disjointed. James continued to rant.
You took my place. If it weren't for you, give me back my place.
James was growling like a stray dog. I replied calmly. I didn't take it.
It was taken from you because you didn't fulfill your responsibilities. Shut up. I bet you whispered in Dad's ear and had him kick me out.
James, consumed by suspicion, couldn't be reached with words. Deborah asked timidly.
That man, could he be? That's right.
A man who is already considered long gone by society. That's James. However, James himself is still alive, abandoned without any help, all alone.
I shouldn't have bothered with you in the first place.
Another figure appeared. It was Amanda, also in a disheveled state. Amanda pointed at James and shouted.
I only gave you a chance because you said you were a rich boy, but now you've fallen to being just a jobless bum. Then get away from me. Having you around is just a nuisance when you can't even cook.
He retorted back at Amanda, not backing down. Amanda's face contorted even more with anger.
What are you saying? I can't get a job because your father leaked my information to corporate executives. Take responsibility. That's because you got greedy beyond your status.
The two endlessly complained about each other. Truly, weren't they a perfect match no matter what?
They're suspicious people. Someone call the police.
I grabbed Deborah's hand and started running. Right now, the two of them were absorbed in each other in a sense. It was now or never to escape.
Hey, Dorothy! Don't you run away, you coward.
I felt the two of them chasing after us. Hearing the commotion from inside the office, male employees and security guards came rushing out. Before long, the two were restrained by the sturdy security guards. James shouted in frustration.
I didn't do anything. So why am I going through this? Doing nothing is your problem.
I said that, as if spitting it out. James and Amanda were taken away by the police as dangerous individuals. From then on, they were forbidden from approaching me and Brian.
Forbidden from approaching my own wife and child? That's ridiculous.
He apparently made that claim, but of course, James was no longer my husband or anything. The more he spoke, the more he creeped out those around him, they say. Amanda also couldn't get a job because William pulled some strings behind the scenes, so she reluctantly stuck with James.
She's the woman who stole James from me and Dad from Brian. I can't forgive her.
William said that, quietly angry.
They're both jobless and struggling to even eat. They don't have any savings from fooling around.
So somehow, they showed up seeking financial assistance or something from me. Despite that, they didn't even apologize to me or anything. Half a year passed since James and Amanda's intrusion. During that time, Deborah returned to her parents' home from the shock, and I ended up taking care of Brian. It was really tough. I'd go see him during breaks and after work to breastfeed him. Just that made me feel like a mom, but the reality wasn't like that at all.
You're crying again. What's wrong? Are you hungry? Or is something wrong with your diaper?
Even when I talked to him, there was no response. He was still a baby who couldn't speak yet. I picked up the sobbing Brian and gently called his name.
Don't cry, Brian.
I wonder if those words got through to him. Brian looked up at me with teary eyes.
I'm sorry, Brian, that you don't have a dad. But I'll work hard for both of us.
I said that with a prayer. The words still didn't seem to get through. He probably just happened to stop crying by coincidence.
Deborah will take care of you again starting tomorrow.
I got a call from Deborah. She said she recovered from the shock and will return to her babysitting job. Brian is more attached to Deborah, if anything. She spends more time with him and has been handling this difficult childcare. I'm grateful, not jealous at all. But
I'll become a mom you can be proud of.
From now on, I won't just leave it all to Deborah, I'll study childcare too. And so, let's live together, the two of us, with my one and only irreplaceable family.